capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I
It's
know.
really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy Strong's. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. So tonight, Dan Plaat of the Three Left Show, my regular recurring guest, is joining me once again, and we're going to be talking first about some topics of urbanism and how it relates to socialism in terms of actually solving some of the problems that urbanists, especially new urbanists, like to bring up, but never really have a great solution for. How are you doing tonight, Dan?
Just peachy. Though, of course, always, as the Hulk says, the secret is always being angry. I'm angry. Guess what? What are we angry about this week? The final. I mean, Biden already did this in October with the whole I'm stopping the strike. I'm a hero. Of course, he was going to do it again, and but this time it required a congressional vote, and wouldn't you know it, everyone voted for it. Or almost everyone voted for it, including a majority. And of course, it's always never a matter of majority or all of, but the squad. So, and I was always never going to I call them the squad, because other people call them this block, but they're not really a block. They never vote as a block. They never do anything together as a block. I mean, sometimes they do a press conference together, but they're never voting as a block. They're always, two are voting present, two are voting against, but not all of them. So why call them a block? And if they're not a block, then they're not really anything. Don't call them. It's not worth calling them a movement. They're not all consistent democratic socialists. One of them maybe is more radical with defund the police, but only one, Bush, right? One of them. And but then they'll vote for money for Ukraine and other imperialist stuff. And it's not, it's just they're not allowed to. They're not as Democrats. They're just not allowed to actually be independent voices. And this whole, David Sirota types that are very much, hate the corruption of the Democrats, know they're a capitalist party, but will say we have to reform them because there's nothing else. And
so capitalist realism.
And will not just go to the Green Party or consider them for longer than a minute, as they say, yeah, but Howie Hawkins, there are these two black revolutionary times, and the impression that Howie was also, he liked the squad, and he was saying that, what was, they misinterpreted what he was saying, where because he said, yes, the Republicans are fascist and Democrats are not better, but he interpreted him saying, he starts the clip of him would start with him saying, because I've heard him say it a dozen times, he starts with the Republicans are fascist, they need to be, but then the next so it sounds like he's making a lesser evilist argument, but then the next thing he says is, but if you vote for Democrats, you're lost in the sauce because they're also a capitalist party. And but yeah, it was so odd that these black revolutionaries, like many others who aren't Greens that should be, if they just listen to all of it, or just we need to talk to them more, so they, because otherwise they're just getting literally a 10-second clip and they misinterpret what is actually being said somehow.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they were kind of skeptical. They weren't throwing it out. But then they see some Greens on Facebook basically give a lesser evilist argument. They see certain Green chapters be lesser evilist, which they were in 2020. and because they're not socialist. Some of the chapters aren't socialist, so
Right.
they
They're
did
just
not.
progressive or
They weren't.
environmentalist Dems. Yeah.
They weren't really for Howie or for changing our line to being
No.
eco-socialist. So like the Rhode Island Greens, for example. So, but they're getting certified or de-affiliated basically.
Oh
And,
wow. Going that far. That's cool.
well, I mean, the National Greens, like we've laid down a line. We're independent left, and if you're not like going to go along, say no, we're not going to say vote for Biden because Trump needs to lose. Then you shouldn't be in this party. It's just as simple as that. Join the DSA. And it's funny because many like joined the Greens 20 years ago because the DSA was nothing. DSA was nothing until 2016, and even now, most of their added what was it? Their added numbers were baby leftists who were not really committed to the DSA, but simply wanted to learn more. And this DSA just seemed to be the best conduit to do that because of Bernie. Now they're all left, or they're defunct, or they're not active, because after 2 failed presidential campaigns, they can smell that the DSA isn't really this big conduit for change. They're looking for what is. Encouraging. I talked to somebody who was the leader or the underliner for the Berkshire DSA, and I think she's ready to jump ship. But because like all of her activities were basically book reading and movie nights, so it was all educational stuff.
That's cool.
The last 6 years, anyway. Yeah, so that was a good conversation. I will need to. My mic was off, so I basically just have her audio. So I need to like edit. I need to do a little more work in editing the episode, and I just put it off because it's just painful to. Well, I need to record a few minutes saying my audio was not there. Only in the very end did I notice that my mic was off. So the last question, but mostly I'm just reacting to what she's saying. I'm not really asking her a lot. So. Or you can infer what she's. Yeah. Most of her part is just her talking about herself and then what she was doing. So the questions aren't really necessary. They were really simple. But anyway, let's wrap up what we were doing last time. Promise the last Ode to Urbanity video. It's shorter this time, and we can try to get down to what they really do. And because it's a mystery to me, and I'm sure like many other fakers out there, they will not say, because like maybe they have a leftist agenda or some type of like non-establishment agenda, but they, in order to advance, in order to have they're trying to do both things, right? And I kind of see the logic behind it, or the reason for it. When you're truly an outsider, you have no access to the means of success and gaining an audience, gaining resources. You just don't. You're just locked out when you're actually opposition. So you pretend you're not opposition. Like this one person who wants to do community building and is definitely not on the side of the petty bourgeois, but has to pretend she is for the sake of like getting into real estate circles, so she can, in her mind, she's infiltrating. And she's going to alone, though. That's the problem. She's doing it alone, or maybe she has enough allies, but she's getting in, infiltrating, so she can save the neighborhood from the ghetto, from gentrification, by getting on the inside as a real estate developer type. And she's in the circles and going to the conferences, and her social media presence is total girl boss, and it makes me sick, and I hate it because like there's bits of it where it's like being a worker and being petty bourgeois are the same thing, and it's this confusion that like every worker is actually an entrepreneur, even when you're working a wage job. That's what it sort of feels like the rhetoric is. Let's see. Well, wait, hold on. Let me bring it up because I did save it.
Sure.
So I can be exact. Oh yeah, okay. So it's hey small business owners. unsolicited advice. Refer people to the same people in small businesses that refer to you or have referred to you over the years. Help them promote their products or services the same way they promote you. Bring people with you to their events the same way that they bring people to your events. Basically, be tit for tat. Help them make money like they help you make money. Cooperative economics and collective work and responsibility are powerful. With a smile, Coach Carmen.
That last little bit there, the fact that you use cooperative economics, and I'm guessing is not creating cooperative housing at the same time.
So that's what I'm referring to. That
sucks.
Small business owners doing business with each other is cooperative economics. So they are definitely like unintentionally co-opting it. But I mean, it's like, oh, this is good. This is like, I like it. That's a good thing, and I think I'm doing a good thing. These are obviously the same thing. Because I mean, obviously, with small petite bourgeois people, we're working together, right? We have a class interest, and we're cooperating as a class. So we're doing cooperative economics. So under that rubric, Wall Street firms are also doing cooperative economics.
All cooperative.
It's all cooperative. I mean, that's the thing about humankind. We are a cooperative species.
We are, yeah.
And even the ruling class is actually very collaborative with each other. And when we want to fight class war, rather when we want to oppose class war and we want to oppose inequality, we're the ones being uncooperative. They're, the ruling class, petite bourgeois, they're actually very cooperative. They're doing cooperative economics. We're actually the uncooperative ones. That's the way it really it plays in the minds of normies and liberals.
Yeah, we don't want to play by their rules and
liberals. So when I say
system,
I want to seize property or distribute it or have community ownership, it's like I'm speaking a foreign language that isn't cooperative economics. It's seen as other. It's not like what. It's actually confusion. What am I advocating for? Because it's not cooperative, because cooperative economics is what the small business owners do. But I'm not for the small business owners.
So
I say I'm for workers, not petite bourgeois. Even though some small business owners are workers, they're producing most of the value of their business, let's say. And that's one of the distinctions you can make, where it's like, well, when is a small business owner a worker? It's when maybe if they have two other people working under them or with them, but they're doing most of the labor, then they're still a worker. If they're not producing a majority of the value, then they are an exploiter. So.
Oh boy. All right. Well, shall we start with the urbanity?
Yes. So this is about the myth of 1.3 million vacant investor homes in Canada, and we can take it from there.
Cool.
But it goes
Canada has 1.3 million vacant.
But the theme here is when you are not, as I've kind of been ranting about, when you maybe are trying to get to a socialist conclusion or want to breadcrumb people to socialism, but you don't want to use the word socialism, or you don't want to be a left because lefties are losers and you don't want
to stigmatize it. Yeah, right. All right.
Vacant homes, according to a recent article that goes on to explain that this is 6 years of housing supply being used as an alternative to gold. In other words, sitting empty due to investors buying homes not to live in or rent out, but just to hold as an investment. Like someone might buy and hold stocks, bonds, and cryptocurrencies named after Japanese dog memes. Some people have cited this article to show that we don't really lack housing supply in this country. There's plenty of extra housing just sitting empty. Housing being treated more as an investment than a place to live.
In the U.S., it's 6 million.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's at least the number we've used since Occupy, actually. So who knows what it is now. Maybe I could look that up while you play the video.
Yeah. And by the way, James, Plaat is also from the South and identifies with the hillbillies. So you were in good company. That was not a hostile comment.
actually is a major obstacle to affordability. But in this video, we want to propose that the problem goes much deeper than vacant investment homes, which exist but aren't nearly as common as articles like this would have you believe.
That figure of 1.3 million homes is real, but the interpretation is wrong. The number comes from a 2021 OECD report referencing the 2016 Canadian census, which counted 1.3 million homes, 9% of the country's housing stock, as not occupied by usual residents, where a usual resident means someone living there as their primary residence. It's simply a mistake to assume that all or even most of these are empty investment properties. This 9% actually includes empty houses and apartments that are on the market available to buy or rent that just haven't sold or rented yet, or that have been sold or rented but the new occupant just hasn't moved in yet. Some census tracts have high numbers of empty homes because of big housing developments that just happened to get completed in the run-up to the census. These homes are vacant, but this is the opposite of hoarding by investors. Transaction and moving vacancies might make up half of vacant homes in more expensive cities, based on American data.
So what's the other half? Are they legitimately vacant homes? Like, I feel like they're leaving that part out.
No, they get to it. They're saying that half of it is just transactionary, sort of like how
Right.
the best
No, I understand. Yeah.
like the best unemployment rate is 4%.
Mhm.
Because 4% is literally the number of people like that are between jobs
In transition between one another.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, like that's
I get
the
that.
ideal. Like it's never going to be 0 or 1%. 4 is like the best. That's full employment basically.
Right.
But
good
that's
to,
if you're
good to
not,
know they're leading towards the
yeah, that's
that
not
other
if you're
half.
not counting people who aren't looking, or if you're not counting. There's many ways to mislead with stats.
Absolutely.
Good stats include as many kind of variables or modifiers as possible, or if the stat is really for a very specific thing. So you need a group of stats, then you can have a larger number, like counting the number of, and I'm just citing a test I just took, a multiple choice test, the number of files that were done by a team for like each day of the week. You can look at the number for each day, and then you can calculate how many files they did that week.
Sure.
Because if you just go by one day, you might get, if
might
you
get
average it,
an anomaly. Yeah.
yes, it wouldn't be accurate.
Gotcha.
The idea of 1.3 million vacant homes that can be requisitioned to solve our housing supply problem is even weaker when you realize that not all of these homes are even vacant. The 9% includes residences recorded as temporarily occupied because the occupants, whether students or workers, identify a primary residence somewhere else. University towns have big clusters of so-called empty homes near the universities because lots of students live in an apartment most of the year but record their parents' home as their primary residence. Students are also important because the census happens in early May, right after the end of the university school year. So some student apartments are vacant, but only because the students moved out a week and a half earlier. Another category that shows up as not occupied by usual residents is vacation properties, which drive resort towns like Whistler and Mont-Tremblant up to half of all their housing being, quote-unquote, vacant. Maybe this is a problem for affordability in those communities, but it's not particularly relevant for the problems facing urban housing markets. Also, so many jobs in resort towns very much rely on these visitors and temporary residents.
When you look at Canada's major cities, especially the most expensive ones associated with housing investors, their rates of these broadly defined vacant homes are actually below the national average. This makes sense. If you consider yourself a savvy housing investor, you're probably not going to buy a house or condo and then leave it empty. You're going to rent it out, especially in cities like Toronto and Vancouver where rent is high, in part because these cities haven't built a lot of purpose-built rentals over the past few decades, meaning that the secondary rental market is actually pretty important. Even if you're an investor who bought the property mainly to see its value go up, in most cases you want rental income on top of that. Renting out your property also allows you to deduct expenses from your income tax bill, including repairs, maintenance, utilities, and property tax. If we want to add another tax to further disincentivize vacant homes, then that's fine, but there's no massive glut of 6 years' worth of housing supply ready to be mobilized. One credible estimate based on Vancouver is that an empty homes tax in Toronto or Ottawa could increase housing supply there by up to 1%. That would help, but it's far from the 9% of so-called vacant housing we started with.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, housing being seen more as an investment than a place to live actually is a major problem, but it goes much deeper than vacant homes or even specifically housing investors.
Right.
It goes to the fundamental question of whether we as a society even want
So it's like
housing
they're
to be
asking
affordable.
a leftist
Obviously, many
question, you know, and they're not asking why are the poor hungry, they're asking why are they poor, right? So it's like the rest of the video, I think, will go some kind of socialist direction. It doesn't, like most of their videos, but it's like
Right.
my
Almost
and this,
there. Walking right
yeah,
up to it.
and
Yeah.
I think almost there is kind of good for the people who are not yet baby leftists, but like they're libs that are converting to being baby leftists because
Yeah.
they kind of need all of this debunking of how reformism doesn't work or won't solve the problem. They need all of this spelled out in all these different ways. Like, well, what about this? What about the vacant homes? What about
Right.
this? You know, all these
Yeah.
other things we can do, the nibble around the edges, rather than addressing the main problem, which is the question of do we want homes to be affordable or not?
Yeah.
Well, if you're a
Yeah.
capitalist or if you're a petty bourgeois, you have interests in actually making sure that housing isn't affordable, as they will
Right.
explain. So they're pretty. They're actually making it's almost like a second thought video, but instead of the last minute being, and that's why we should go to socialism or build a socialist movement, they end with just a kind of like we're not addressing the bigger problem.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds
Which
me of like
so many fucking journalists do that are like critical or investigating like about how corrupt everything is. And like, well, there's big problems. Don't ask me what to do about it.
Yeah. It's kind of like the John Oliver way of doing things, where you will identify a problem in society, but never quite connect it back to the system itself.
Because my hypothesis is that if you did give an answer, it would need to be socialistic.
It would have to be socialism, yeah.
And that makes you a economic and mostly politically pariah. It means that it puts you in the doghouse. You will not have a future career. So as long as you're a careerist of some kind, whether you're in planning, as these people may be, or any other professional like PNC, if you're in the PNC, you can't be socialist. You will be ostracized. You have to keep it on the DL, which has been the case since the New Left. And it's why we lost a labor movement. And you know, you had a PNC that just couldn't be in solidarity with workers anymore for their careers. So, you know, you kind of have to do what is called class suicide and say, I'm not going to have a career, or my career is going to be hamstrung because because solidarity is more important. And that's the question and needs to be posed to all of these professionals, which they will completely, you know, try to get around.
Yeah, that's a good point, Blatt. Although I will say that Cody at least will say capitalism is the problem and kind of vaguely gesture at socialism without coming necessarily to a specific conclusion. But yeah, in general, that's a point well taken.
No, John Stewart, the more he talks, you know that he's not like afraid of being called a socialist. He's legitimately a capitalist.
He just likes capitalism. Yeah, right.
He does like capitalism. He wants it to be fixed. He wants like
a kinder, gentler
stakeholder capitalism, as it's called, or conscious capitalism, or good effective altruism. Well, it's not the same thing, but those are the words used. Those are the words used in those systems. That's something Chapo's been harping about lately, which does need to be there, because it was in the libraries, my own libraries for Eben, that there was like a set of effective altruism books. And I feel like I had seen it before in new atheist circles. Hyper rationalist liberals, and so like, well, if this is tied with like those assholes are like this stuff, I'm sure it sucks.
Probably not good.
I look for the contents, and I could basically tell like, oh, this is just saying like rich people should get all the money because in order to do the really good big stuff, you need a lot of capital. And the state can't do it. So we basically need individuals
because reasons,
to be as rich as a state or have the resources of a state. And then they will do the large projects that carry, you know, humanity forward. You know, they'll build they'll do the next Tennessee Valley, you know, power authority. the renewable energy projects. Just the state can't do it. It can't be trusted, or it's not. I don't. You have to share power if you use the state. So
Yeah.
So
Reminds me too, Adam Conover, famous from Adam Ruins Everything. He had a recent video where he took on these philanthropists. It was actually pretty good, and he talked about how the city where Walmart was founded has really benefited from the Waltons on philanthropy. They have they have plays and art exhibits and all kinds of cultural stuff and job opportunities that they wouldn't normally have, and so everyone in the town just absolutely loves them. But of course, they don't see the hundreds or thousands of small town USA main streets that have been shut down specifically
it's like
to
the
make that
town
happen.
where Dave Chappelle moved to.
Exactly like that,
And
yeah.
he basically is investing so that the downtown has 3 new businesses.
Yeah, right.
And this is saving the town. Like, no, one rich person doesn't save a town, because all they can do is start a few enterprises, as if those are the anchors that are going to create an economic engine or a base. It isn't. It just isn't. And,
Right. No, yeah.
It's fun. I think capitalists believe that they, because that's the cool. It was capitalism that created all of this bounty and abundance, but it was always state infrastructure undergirding any of the prosperity. It was always state infrastructure. So never private. Private ventures were always just like the little blips before the actual investment occurred. The investment by a state. Because states are actually very powerful, because they actually represent the collective effort, labor of that entire nation state.
Right.
It's a lot of collectivized labor that's bound up in tax revenue and all that. Its magnitude's more than any actual profit from a business. It's interesting to think, but that's why, but you have to share power when you use a state if it's democratic. So there's always a bit of selfishness involved with, I don't want to share. I want to be able to control my own destiny. And that's why, the private enterprise is so goddamn important versus a collective statist or, so a worker run approach.
Right. Absolutely. Well, let's get on in the video.
Yeah, we're only halfway through.
People do, but it's really striking how, when housing costs increase, we don't consistently panic or recoil like we do when food or gas prices increase.
I was just about to say the same thing.
The audience is always a petty bourgeois or PMC audience. So I think that's where we're not the audience. We're mad at their content because we're not liberal professionals. So they're talking to liberal professionals that actually may believe that, the real estate markets are natural and so on. But the point of their video is that it actually is a choice. And this is good for the broader, deconversion, decolonizing people's minds. But they got to do it gently.
To a large extent, we actually cheer it on. When house prices rise instead of fall during a pandemic, we refer to the resilience and strength of the housing market. When polling shows that people expect housing...
That's because people with housing, often that's their only investment tool they have. Pensions are all gone, lots of retirement plans are gone. So the value of their house basically is their retirement plan. So of course they're going to cheer it on, because for those people...
when you're retired, when the value of your house is all you have, you can't pay property taxes, or at least a property tax that rises with inflation. So in New York, we have a lot of we can't raise property taxes. And there's a lot of hot pepper cheese, plain hot peppers. What kind of pepperoni rolls? Spinach pepperoni rolls.
Ooh, that sounds good.
And then we can put hot pepper on it, I guess. the so we call it the circuit breaker for property taxes, where if your property taxes are like above your income, then your property taxes, you don't pay them or something. And that had to be put into the law of New York State because we just can't change how we tax people. We'd rather put all of these accessory rules to fix these, these exceptions to people who can't pay property taxes or don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in this case, it's retirees that shouldn't have to pay property taxes because, well, they don't have an actual income anymore. So maybe taxation should be based on income only, not whether you own a house or not.
How about that? Yeah.
And keep rising in price. Headlines describe that as real estate optimism.
The real estate market, home prices, where are they headed? New survey by our friends at Nanos Research Group saying that we are pretty optimistic as Canadians that prices will only move higher into 2021.
Rental market reports describe how Toronto historically boasts the highest rents and rent growth. No one talks about optimism in the context of rising food prices, and it would be pretty weird to say that a country boasts a high cost of medicine. But we talk about housing like this all the time.
That's how we talk about the stock market, and it's deeply unhealthy when applied to housing. Simply put, there's significant pressure to avoid policies that make housing more affordable.
You're promising to tackle skyrocketing housing prices. One of the ways is with that 20% tax on the sale of homes to foreign buyers. 2/3 of Canadian families actually own a home already. If you're successful at cooling the housing market, that would mean that people who have invested their life savings in their homes may not have it anymore. They're relying on that for their retirement. So what is more important to you? Helping younger people get access to the market, or allowing older Canadians who rely on the value of their homes to live?
It's baffling that this is a question, especially because...
Yeah, I didn't really understand her question there. She was talking about foreign people in buying homes and putting.
But that's the status quo, Zach. For the NDP candidate there saying just to have a tax on foreign investment in housing as a commodity is to call into question all housing as commodity. And so that has to be like argued down as, unreasonable, and calling into question the retirement of older Canadians or what have you, or making it a poison pill that someone has to lose. Now, great, this video, Urbanity, they do criticize this framing. And when they say we, they are referring to the capitalist status quo, how we talk about housing. We talk about housing affordability. So they are critiquing all of that. And I think it's, but this is something, in leftist academia, there's much to be read about it, of how there's so much critique of capitalism, but that's okay as long as, or rather that in capitalist realism, there's probably a chapter about how critiquing capitalism actually encourages or strengthens capitalist realism. This is something Second Thought was talking about when, no, it wasn't Second Thought. It was Pop Culture Detective, their newest video.
Oh yeah.
Involving Marvel movies, where they say like, if you want to change the status quo, you will be a villain, and it actually ends with the Avengers basically like Hawkeye's like pointing an arrow at the screen. It's like, you're the villain. The Avengers are gonna come after you,
right?
Because any villain basically wants to change the world.
Right.
And changing the world is dangerous.
Cannot be good.
It's never good.
Status quo is the best we can hope for. Yeah.
Anyway, so in a way, Urbanity is playing into that, and maybe on purpose, maybe because they are in the ideological trash can, and they're not. But it's also any socialist or lefty who also plays the game of, well, I can't be an out socialist. I need to be soft with my rhetoric and just critique the system, and hopefully those breadcrumbs will lead people to being a socialist. Well, I want to let you know, no. you need to be forward. Like we didn't get all these new leftists until Bernie Sanders, as a senator, started using the S word. He wouldn't use it before, but Occupy, I think he said so in many interviews, Occupy showed him there was a thirst for anti-capitalism, or rather that for moving beyond it, or rather that it was safe. There was an audience that just needed to hear the S word more. And it was, he was right in that respect. And I was too, because I believe the same thing after Occupy, that there were all these people who were ready to just not go beyond just critiquing capitalism, say, well, yeah, capitalism has these problems, we need to reform them. And then Occupy was inundated with that, but the core of it was revolutionary. So there were many people who were turned up by that, and their consciousness was raised. And the consciousness doesn't get raised just by saying, we talk about housing in a really screwed up way. You have to end the video with, and here's an alternative, because otherwise there is no alternative.
No.
If everyone who critiqued capitalism this way and did believe there was an alternative, we would have a full socialist movement. No way, I believe. And and that's sort of one of the paradoxes of, like, we don't have a socialist movement until enough people are brave enough to commit class suicide, I guess, and say, but in our case, it was because, my conclusion was I wasn't going to have a career because of the 2009 crash. I wasn't going to have a career. My career was going to be stunted. So why should I have any allegiance to it? This idea that, well, I need to tough it out and then I'll have a career as long as I'm not too radical. So I made a calculated move to radicalize myself and allow myself and not say, well, maybe I need to pump the brakes and hold off on all that and being political.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, my story is pretty similar to you, and it pretty well came out of Occupy as well, when I just started being like, hey, there's got to be something better out there than this progressive wing of the Democrats, because their solutions don't really sound like solutions.
It sucks that they're still on with their same strategy and talking points, and they have their own podcast and they talk the same way they did back in 2009. Right. And it's sad.
It is.
But it's the only thing that really depresses me, because if we would have a more robust movement if we did really have a left, but there's still even talking about the Dems as a left or the left, or that there's this left to the Democrats. Because they interact more with mainstream media maybe than they do with real working people. Because if they did, then they would not be able. They don't need to talk the mainstream media talk or the ruling class narrative. Like, they're still operating in that milieu, because they are belt wingers at the end of the day. Some of them, or they interact with it because they know that's where power is. But they're, you're not going to build counterpower just interacting with that established.
Yeah, the entrenched power.
Yeah, so
very true.
Yeah.
All right, well, moving on.
It refers to older Canadians who likely bought their homes decades ago at a fraction of the current price. For them, the question is whether they make a large or very large profit from selling their homes. How can that be considered as important as young people being able to buy a home at all? To be clear, we're not fixated on home ownership specifically. We rent, and we think that renting has a lot of underrated advantages, including not having to worry too much about maintenance, flexibility in terms of upsizing or downsizing your housing configuration, and having more job mobility. But
you are paying for maintenance as a renter. Where do they think that money comes from? That's a silly thing to say.
It's silly in the way they frame it, because if you were in a co-op, cooperative housing, community-owned housing, you're still and even when it's public, state housing, you're still renting. That doesn't take away any of the advantages of renting. In fact, maybe that's what they're kind of, again, it's underlining. If you make an argument that renting is cool and that it's cooler or better and more efficient for housing to be managed in a collective manner, or rather by entity that you pay, that's actually leans towards left-wing housing solutions, because those are managed by a smaller,
Yeah.
you don't have to manage your own housing. You
Right.
you elect a board to do it
Yeah.
instead. But you can have democracy that way. You can have
Absolutely.
accountability that doesn't exist in a capitalist renting market. So they're not, they're just not. But again, it could be taken that way by an audience, or they're stuck in the status quo.
Yeah.
And they're just
Hard
going
to say which one.
see it as market renting, and then get mad about, like, well, renting is very exploited. You're being exploited. You're paying rent that's equal to a mortgage payment. Why not, rent to own or buy a house? But you can't because it's too unaffordable. So it's like they have a lot of holes in their, argument based on the world.
Right.
So,
But at the same time, owning makes sense in a lot of contexts, and it should be an option.
This wouldn't be a hashtag Urbanity video if we didn't talk about zoning and other supply restrictions, but those are also deeply rooted in seeing housing more as an investment than a place to live. It's completely normal for people to oppose new housing to protect their property values. This comes up all the time in letters from NIMBYs wanting to block multi-unit buildings that would provide more housing
so
supply
they don't come
in their
across as
neighborhoods.
libertarians
We can't
here.
stop.
Before in the other video, they came across as libertarians because they were just
just like
about
relax
government
the code.
regulation. But in this case, they're tying all of that to houses being a commodity. So it could lead to the conclusion that housing as commodity is the problem, not government regulation itself, because all of those are symptoms. And they kind of leave the video on that, so maybe we could move on.
Yeah.
You
want to just dump this one? Sure.
Well, if you want to, if you
Or
don't
just
want
move
to.
it. I just kind of want to see where they sum up a little bit.
Yeah. Do it then. I'll just shut up.
No problem.
Individuals from preferring their home or land to be worth more money, but that doesn't make it a legitimate use of government power. When business owners lobby the government to limit competition that threatens the profit or value of their business, we rightly see that as corruption. But homeowners doing the same thing is just normal, maybe because homeowners are a majority of the population.
People like to focus on faithless investors and
It's the way the
unsavory
working
speculators.
class was bought
and they're-
off in the 50s. Part of the working class was bought, like enough of the working class was bought off by making it so they could buy homes and be homeowners. And this was also something even going back in the 20s, where government policy was like, the only way to, or one of the main ways of stopping a socialist revolution is to make, they wrote about this, like, we just need to make enough Americans homeowners, and then they will have capitalist interests like ours. So it was kind of a plot, actually.
Yeah, to get more buy-in.
Yeah.
Money does contribute to the mania of ever-increasing home prices, but fundamentally what draws them in is the scarcity of housing, which is to a large extent a policy choice. The most comprehensive study on housing in Canada in recent years had findings suggesting that speculation is more likely to occur in inefficient markets that are supply constrained. They go on to explain that increased speculation is more likely to amplify
This
the
I do
impact
not
of
agree
persistent
with.
market
I do
imbalance.
not get how they're getting this conclusion here. That constrained supply is what causes speculation.
Yeah, no.
Speculation occurs in many ways and can occur when there's actually quite an abundance of things. Like how the Manifest Destiny was a product of land speculation, basically. You had tons of land, and you had capitalists speculating on that land, and thus necessitating westward expansion. Because otherwise, they couldn't speculate on it. They couldn't make money. But maybe I'm just being like, it's not a data argument I'm making. So
Even this quote that's up on the screen right now that says increased speculation is more likely to amplify the impact of persistent market imbalances rather than serve as the key cause, but they're saying it's the cause. So That seems kind of inconsistent there.
Rather than serve as a key cause.
We'll leave you here. Policies meant to encourage vacant homes to be sold or rented will probably provide modest benefit, but this just isn't the silver bullet fix to our housing supply crisis that it's been made out to be, especially for urban areas. We do not have 6 years' worth of housing supply just sitting around that we can mobilize. Vacant homes are a small part of a much bigger problem where people, not just investors and speculators, but also many regular homeowners and the politicians representing them, see housing primarily as an investment and don't entirely agree that it should even be affordable. This system is self-sustaining with lots of bad incentives. People who manage to save and break into the hot housing market now can easily switch from being frustrated by high prices to being invested in seeing prices continue to rise. This isn't meant as a personal criticism of them, it's just the way the incentives work.
Thanks for watching through to the end of the video.
Sure.
How do you feel about of incentives when discussing structural or systems as an ecologist?
Yeah.
You know, when we plant like certain things, are we incentivizing growth in another plant? You know, it's I just dislike it because it's used by technocrats in all these ways where it's like divs.
Right. Yeah.
It's like saying this is not structural change to change incentives.
Right. Yeah, it's similar to the argument of we just need the right people in the right positions of power, and then the system would work perfectly.
Right.
So, at the same time, things like the profit motive are definitely an incentive to disregard anything else.
I know, and yeah, in a way, profit maximization, the very forces of logic of capital, these are technically incentives. You know, that were created or that developed through material needs back in the early modern era. But let's see. I did find an article just with some numbers. It's called House Grail, Pete Ortiz, and just some numbers. In 2009, there were 19 million vacant homes. Today, there are 15 million vacant homes. So that's the vacant home number, which does include, as he lists, abandoned homes, which means these are not ready-made or ready-to-move-in homes. They're ones that need work, or they're houses that have been long abandoned beyond renovation, basically. But they could just be houses that do need renovation. So it's like you need to rebuild the house. Homes awaiting use or sale, as like mentioned in the video, temporary or seasonal, which it's its own can of worms. But let's say seasonal homes, vacation homes can include cabins, things that you wouldn't really use as a full-time residence. Not just the vacation homes of the upper middle class, where they definitely are houses, full houses. And those are the ones just listed in this article. But I think that's why the number 6 million we use, like in 2009, if the actual number from the Federal Reserve for economic data was 19 million, and we were using 6 million. So maybe that was excluding all of these other types of vacant homes. And maybe it's the same amount decline from 19 to 15 million. Maybe it's 5 million vacant homes now. I will point out that the rhetoric from us lefties has always been that we're not talking about vacant homes as a replacement for all housing demand, or as some kind of panacea. If we just put all of those, made all of those vacant homes free or accessible right away, that would solve housing affordability. We are simply comparing that number to the number of houseless that if they were just given to people who are houseless, then we would not have houselessness. And it's more of an anti-poverty, rhetoric. It's part of the mismatch between the resources on hand and the depredation we have. Yeah, which is something that they don't touch on, because whether they are or not, but let's say they are, their audience are professional liberals. And that's why they're just kind of talking that way. The other video I gave you after this one was about, again, not socialist housing policy, but using and this is something I kind of considered a bit back in my college days, and maybe even a bit after, was just using the phrase non-market. So you'll have certain types of leftists actually say, like, well, true free markets are non-capitalist markets because capitalist markets require state intervention and monopoly on force. Real free market, like, people want free markets. That's what people like about capitalism. But they don't like all the things that actually makes capitalism what it is. But they, so it's like capitalism is actually good, but it actually, if you take away all the things you don't like, you get some type of like market socialism kind of thing. Well, I don't know how that works in a policy, and Marx had a lot to write about that. Or he did, and that's what the critique of the Gotham program kind of was. Maybe. But there's a lot of other socialist writers have picked at that. But non-market was more appealing to me also as an alternative to using the S word if you're not going to use it, because I don't know, it's clear. It's scary. People can, like, when you talk about, if you're anti-consumerist or corporate, these things have power because they're operating in a free market or a market. So maybe instead of thinking of capitalism as an entire system, you just think of markets as being the problem. And it's just like, well, maybe things are just non-market, but still, like, it's when you're confused about like what's statist and what is and what's socialist and what's not.
It still conveys the same concept. It's just perhaps less scary and palatable. But I don't think it's shying away from what needs to be done either.
But it's also when you're in the camp of being at least anti-capitalist, or you want to be post-capitalist, you will use the phrase non-market. And that's it's definitely progress. It's definitely something a baby leftist does. So you have the next video, if you bring that up. Again, 10 minutes. Quite a lot of stats. It's the same kind of tone as the Urbanity. But the guy is also Canadian, I think. He uses Vancouver a lot.
Nice.
But he talks just about non-market and has a similar kind of conclusion about how, but we can't solve affordable housing with non-market options because we're in a capitalist economy, basically. And it's almost like a kind of a chicken or the egg, where, like, well, we need a political revolution, or a social one, maybe both, in order to have a majority of non-market housing. But of course, we'll mention Vienna and how they are majority non-market housing. They have also were ruled by a socialist government for quite a while,
for a time,
for a long time. So a socialist government does, in fact, it doesn't get you off of capitalism. Austria is not a capitalist, was not a communist state or a socialist country, but you had at least a majority of non-market. So you can have non-market as a majority, but you're still in the capitalist superstructure. So you're not. That's the kind of the best social democrats can do.
It's closer to an actual mixed economy,
which is why non-market is not the same as socialist. Because non-market does not guarantee democracy or worker control.
Right.
Olympic Village is your classic Vancouver neighborhood. Seawall? Check. Outdoor athletic store? Check. Big boxy glass buildings? Check. Crazy expensive housing? Oh, you better believe that's a big check. Renting an Olympic Village is not cheap. For example, a 2-bedroom apartment in that building behind me will cost you $4,200 a month. A 2-bedroom in this building, $5,000 a month. A 2-bedroom unit in this building rents for $4,500 a month. And just across the street, a 2-bedroom unit in that building rents for $1,900. How's that possible? Who's behind this? And could that be the subject of this video?
Could that be the subject of this video?
I like this presentation. He's got a lot more charisma.
This guy has way more fucking personality. Way more. Yeah. Which goes to show you that leftists, as opposed to liberals, are mega chads, and liberals
right.
So
are
how is this building so
virgins.
affordable?
Cringe. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Cringe
it's really
vid-
quite
cringe
simple.
virgins.
Cringe virgins.
It doesn't
yeah.
make money. Let me elaborate.
It doesn't make
This
money.
building is owned by the Athlete Village Housing Co-op.
So that I've been pondering how to frame it too recently, and I was thinking, well, what if we just call it nonprofit housing rather than socialized housing or any other thing?
I do that too. Well, and sometimes, depending on my audience, of course. What if a socialist economy is a nonprofit? What if everything? This is a thought experiment for myself as I was radicalizing. What if the entire economy was nonprofit? You have all of these nonprofits who do the things businesses do, but they're allowed to legally. It seems like you have to file as a nonprofit so that you're not taxed like a business, so that you are able to operate at a net zero, or you're not a for-profit
you don't have a
business.
big
You have to
chunk
be.
that you get to
You have to ask for permit,
squirrel away.
almost like you have to ask for permission, because when you file, you could be rejected. You have to get permission to basically operate at not a loss, but as a not-for-profit. But what if the whole economy was like this? Obviously, it couldn't. You wouldn't have a state that had revenue unless the revenue came from incomes instead of property tax or taxing businesses, I guess. But that's where you get into actually communist economics. That if you don't have an economy that creates profit so that you can tax, then the state has to work at a completely it has to work completely differently. As far as what resources does it get, or how does it manage resources for common goods? But if the whole economy is nonprofit, which are technically like pseudo public goods, because they're, instead of paying taxes, they're providing something of public benefit. But of course, that's how capitalists talk about their business, that they're providing a public benefit, but they're also making money.
It can get murky, I suppose. But to answer your question, James, it keeps going because nonprofit just means that after you've paid all the expenses, there's nothing left over to divvy up between the owners.
He explains this, by the way.
Yeah. I'm just giving him a little thumbnail sketch of what that means. So you can still hire people to maintain the building. You can still perform the necessary repairs. You can still charge an amount of rent to cover all that stuff.
Oh,
You're just not going above and beyond.
Okay. So actually, James's question comes from the confusion that comes from kind of capitalist realist rhetoric, or just framing. It's literally the thing you don't notice in everyday life, that making money and making profit are the same phrase. Rather, they're used the same, but they should be
interchangeable,
two different phrases. So he says it doesn't make money. Actually, the video maker should be saying it doesn't make a profit. It actually does make money, but that money is being completely reinvested or used for maintenance. So everything technically makes money when it creates value, or when labor is being done, or some resources being extracted. There is rent being collected, but it's not for private, or it's not for profit.
And that money can also cover things like full-time staff, like a front desk person or a handyman or something like that. So people can still make their living off of working for the organization that owns the building. It's just there's no owner class that gets to divvy up everything beyond that for themselves.
And there's another distinction you can make between making a profit and making a surplus, which I believe the distinction there is the intent, that a surplus is assumed to be reinvested and a profit is assumed to be taken away and put into the private pile of the owner. So you can make money. There's the level of making money, which can include the maintenance and a surplus, but that still goes into the project or the entity. Profit is surplus that's going to investors and owners and capitalists. aka parasites.
Yep. True enough.
A non-profit cooperative. Like the name suggests, the co-op isn't trying to make a profit from this building, so it sets rents that only cover the building's operating costs. Things like heat, water, electricity, taxes, mortgage payments, and maintenance. The building next door is a condo, and that 2-bedroom unit is owned by an individual or corporation who very much wants to make some money from their housing, so they can rent it out for, well, really whatever price they can get. Any money they make on top of their own
Whatever the market
operating
will
costs
bear,
is
as they
profit
say.
they can pocket for themselves. Sorry, I just explained to you how landlords work.
Yep.
The condo is an example of
Sorry,
market
guys.
housing. The price
I'm a
is set by the
socialist.
highest bidder.
Sorry. Gotta apologize when you
The
know when you
Athletes Village
say do
Co-op?
something leftist.
Yeah, right.
Pointing out, just explaining what a landlord is kind of an anti-capitalist endeavor.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Is an example of non-market housing. The rent is set by just how much it costs to provide the housing. Why it exists? Well, it's because many people and organizations recognize that housing is, a need, and so they choose to provide housing without trying to make a profit. In some cases, there are charities such as churches and YMCAs who decide to build housing as part of their larger mission. There are nonprofit organizations specifically for housing who often own multiple properties and rent them out like a regular landlord. There are nonprofit co-ops where a group of people collectively own and manage a building and rent it to themselves. Then there's housing that's provided by the government through agencies like BC Housing. And within these categories, there are all kinds of specializations, such as housing for seniors, single moms, refugees, and even Korean seniors. Well, I guess I know my retirement plans. Now, is it always affordable housing? Well, that part's a bit more complicated. Cutting out profits can certainly make rents a bit cheaper, but at the end of the day, it still costs a lot of money to build and operate any building. Some non-market housing does receive subsidies to make its rents really affordable, but without those subsidies, non-market housing rents start out pretty comparable to market rents.
That's
Take for example,
was it
Hanover
chapter
Housing. It's a new
9,
non-market
section
housing
8, sorry,
development
section 8.
Section 8, yeah.
by the Oak Ridge Lutheran Church. It didn't receive major subsidies, so it charges $2,400 for a 2-bedroom, which is, not exactly cheap. But what can make Hanover housing more affordable is time. Hanover housing is in an up-and-coming neighborhood called Oak Ridge. In a decade or so, this will likely be a major city center where art transcends museums, music travels freely, style comes naturally, beauty is all around, and dance is part of life. Wow. Anyways, a regular landlord here would be foolish not to hike up their rents, but Hanover housing would keep their rents more or less the same, and over time, that would make its rents relatively affordable. That's why the Athletes Village Co-op seems so affordable now. $1,900 for a 2-bedroom was actually pretty typical for Olympic Village back when it was built in 2010. But today, the co-op is still charging more or less the same amount, while its neighbors have hiked up rents year after year.
I'm not sure if he's going to get into it, but there's also the component of when that cooperative has paid off their mortgage.
He does. But
okay, cool. All right.
He doesn't
I'll leave him to say
He doesn't
it,
say that the rent will ever be lowered. You can never lower the price of anything, right? But the meaning, but because of, whether inflation for, maintenance costs or what have you, they don't need to raise the rent ever.
Gotcha.
Or that when the mortgage is paid off, then, but it takes so long to do that, it's been 20, 30 years and the rent is now half of what the rest of the neighborhood is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to change a thing.
So it just goes into future subsidies.
And it goes into surplus, because by that time, a 30-year-old building needs more maintenance.
True enough.
Maybe you need to, by then, depending on how you built it, you may need to take out a new loan for renovation. And these are the things that co-op boards are always grappling with.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
But there's one more thing that happens with even more time. You see, Athletes Village Co-op and Hanover Housing took out bank loans to things. So much of the rent you pay here goes towards paying off those loans. So what happens when they finish paying their loans? Well, the housing becomes cheap, like really cheap. That's been the case for this co-op from the 1980s, where rents for a 2-bedroom are only $1,000 a month. And the reason why is because it's fully paid off its loans. And that is why many believe non-market housing could be an answer to the housing crisis. Rents all over the province are skyrocketing, and in Vancouver, they're up 23% from last year. Like, people are renting dens and solariums for about $1,000. For those who are trying to rent in this market, non-market housing promises a home at a stable price right now and an affordable price in the long term.
But hold on, are we really making housing affordable for everyone here? Or just the people who are lucky enough to get into non-market housing? If you look at Athletes Village Co-op and pretty much any other non-market apartment in this city, there are wait lists. It's really difficult to get in. And it makes sense. It's cheaper than market housing. So this initially made me feel pretty uneasy about non-market
It's the
housing.
scale of
It's
like
great
how
for the
many
people who
people
can get
are
in.
doing these projects, you know?
Mhm.
And until you bring in state power doing a massive amount of it, it's going to be something marginal, as the left has been. Any leftist project has been marginal. Its effect has been marginal, and that just drives me crazy. We're growing up and in post-Occupy, where the scope of the project, the leftist project, has been so small. It's only through the Greens as a political party that it feels like the project is it actually fits the scale of the problem. You know, and that's rather than trying to, I guess it's all prefigurative, right? You know, to do this non-market housing, it's prefigurative because it does turn on more people to non-capitalist ways of doing things.
Yeah.
But it's slow, and those prefigurations need to act as a political base for changing it all, not just being on, separate, which has been the case with the new left. It's always been separate. You know, the eco villages, the non-market housing in cities, the hippies that start the co-op. Excuse me.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we'll just continue on in the video here while Dan takes that call.
But what about everyone else? Could it ever be a solution to the broader housing crisis? Well, it turns out, actually, yes.
Let's say you build a lot of non-market housing, like thousands of units, no, tens of thousands of units, no, hundreds of thousands of units all over the city. You build and build and build until non-market housing is a huge player in the housing market. There are no wait lists, no lineups, no shortages. If you want to live in non-market housing, you can. Well, then you might end up with something.
Okay, my brother needs my help for a few
Yeah.
minutes. I'm going to go move furniture to the street.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
We'll
You
continue.
finish the video on your own.
Yep.
Hopefully you'll be done by then. We'll get back.
For sure. What's up? Oh, thank you so much. How thoughtful. You want to wave to the camera? James has been asking about you. So at least make a cameo. Oh, hold on. I didn't see if he did it or not. Oh, he's on ad time. Oh no, you're gonna have to wait here for 30 seconds until James gets off his ad, so you can say hi to him. Or you can at least go in the chat and say hi to James. He's been like, "Where's Amanda?" You're not on screen right now. We're learning about cooperative housing. Hey, don't steal my smoothie. Amanda's here, James. Now she can wave in front of the camera for you.
It's not a smoothie, it's a malt.
Whatever.
You can
it
eat
was
it for
good.
breakfast, but it's candy.
So there's
I
James wants me to add a reward for streamer points if Amanda makes a cameo.
Ooh. All right. I like it.
All right, cool.
Oh, James said I could take it.
No, oh damn it! All are colluding against me. See, people can't get enough of you.
I'll come on tomorrow, okay?
Yeah.
This is incentive for y'all to come back tomorrow.
We are still in the process of unpacking and ordering our world. So Amanda's been
almost
working
there.
diligently at that. She's done a great job. So
The house smells like Christmas.
it does. She got a new candle. That was her hand again, in case you were wondering.
Bye.
Vienna, 60% of the population lives in non-market housing, regardless of their income, and that has created an interesting effect on the larger housing market. When there is an abundance of non-market housing, private landlords have to compete with non-market housing for the
How
same
about
tenants.
that?
They can't afford to inflate rents because people will just apply for the non-market housing next door, where rents can be as low as 251 euros a month.
So I'm struck that it's the way he's framing it. It's almost like thinking of it as a union of home owners, renters. I guess it's a mixture of both, but still, it's in a way like unionizing, but for housing. Kind of cool.
This is known as an integrated or unitary housing market, where non-market housing is so ubiquitous that it actually keeps rents in the private sector from increasing too quickly. In fact, you can measure this effect in places that have lost non-market housing. In Amsterdam, the share of non-market housing has been steadily declining since the 2000s, and with less non-market housing to stabilize the market, rents have rapidly increased. I think that's the ultimate potential of non-market housing, why it's very much a solution to the broader housing crisis. Because when we build enough of it, it actually stabilizes rents in the overall housing market. But that is definitely not the case here. In Canada, non-market housing makes up just about 5% of the housing in our country, and at those rates, it has little to no influence on the wider housing market. So how do we change that? How do we build more non-market housing? Well, it helps to understand how non-market housing is built.
back.
Let's say you want to build non-market housing. What you first need is land. Some nonprofits like churches already have land, and sometimes the government can offer you public land for free or very cheap. But if those options aren't available, well, that's no reason to worry. Because at the end of the day, all you really need to build non-market housing is a positive, can-do attitude and money. You need money. Even if you own your own land, you still need to build something on it. And construction costs aren't cheap. So where does that money come from? Well, like I mentioned in many cases,
that's where you get into the Habitat for
Athletes Village
Humanity
Co-op
model,
and
which is to use a lot of exploited volunteer labor. Donated, and you also rope in a lot of entities like businesses, partners, to bring in crews of people for a day. And it basically, it works into the philanthropy nonprofit complex where all of these corporations get a little PR beat, some points by having their workers donate their time in a mostly mostly compulsory way to help build the housing.
Right.
Which then, at best, like the houses for Habitat in Albany, they're still being built. Like their final cost point is $100,000, which is, quite good, I guess, compared to suburban lots and stuff like that. I guess it's as cheap as a house gets, I suppose. But the fact that in order to get that price point, you needed a shitload of volunteer labor and shit. I myself, in trying to get some more skills, volunteered for Habitat, but instead of doing carpentry, the carpenter was kind of busy, I guess, and didn't really need an assistant at the time. So instead of learning any carpentry, I just painted doors. I painted all the doors.
Oh man!
And because I could paint things, and it was a good, relaxing day. But after doing 2 days of painting, I basically I'm not getting anything out of this. So,
right.
I want to at least be like getting something comparable to an intern, apprentice, not a full apprenticeship, but just a little bit of an internship. I want to be gaining skills if I'm going to be building a house. But the house was mostly done. That was a problem. And you just had these two kind of carpenters volunteering their time, and they're not volunteering to teach anybody carpentry, so they just wanted to focus on the work.
They just want to get it done.
You're right.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't the real. So what I learned was it wasn't the area to do that, the context. So I didn't go back, and I learned that the guy managing Habitat for Humanity was was it him or? Oh yes, he was a VP at American Express, and so in his retirement, he was doing, you know, he was running the habitat for the region as a way to give back.
Yeah.
Um,
Country that's given him
and
so much.
and his wife is a VP or some executive at DreamWorks. So they're very much of
Yikes.
the upper class types.
Yes, indeed.
So and he didn't yeah, and obviously didn't come across when I met him. I'm like, oh, this guy's a complete scumbag. But he's winning. He's trying to doing some indulgences by, like, you know, putting in his time. But I'm sure he's very, you know, he is very well compensated. Yes, like the movie. Yes, the movie people.
The movie people.
And it's Spielberg's movie company.
Oh, does he manage that now? I didn't realize. Cool.
Partially, yeah. I mean, I don't know
Huh.
what his role is now, but I mean, when it was founded, out of him and a few other directors and producers, their desire to have their own. Well, no, it was him and a bunch of ex-Disney people who were really spiteful. They hated Disney.
Yeah.
They hated working with Disney. They wanted something to compete with Disney, which is why a lot of DreamWorks' first stuff was to kind of slap Disney around,
Sure.
or directly copy them. Also, you know, why Shrek is such a Disney satire.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right.
It was designed that way from the ground up. Though Shrek was its own book.
Yeah, it was. I read it growing up. Yeah, wasn't Steve Jobs instrumental in like early DreamWorks as well? I seem to remember that as part of his bio.
Who?
Steve Jobs.
I
think he
guess,
went
but
to work with them.
I would think that his role wasn't that intense. I mean, people like Steve Jobs always exaggerate their role in things.
Oh, for sure.
So
Yeah, it's the Elon effect.
yeah, Steve Jobs was the Elon of the 90s.
That's a good way to put it. All right.
Changing the world through technology. I mean,
Yeah. On
but
that note, let's
basically
continue.
took the credit from everybody like Wozniak.
Indeed. All right. Moving on in the video.
Handle our housing were able to get loans from Van City Credit Union to construct their buildings. In other cases, the government can actually require housing developers to pay for it. For example, at this location, the local government negotiated with the developer to build some non-market housing in exchange for the right to build more density on their land. The result? 233 market condos that subsidize 30 units of non-market housing that's run
That
by a
gets their
charity
own
called
door.
22-1A.
Yeah. Look at that though. I
Even in the design is expressed. It's expressed in
Yep.
the design that the market is hugging the non-market. That's just cube, you know.
yeah. It's like laying on top of it, ruling it from above.
It's like leaning on it, you know, like.
Uh-huh. I would almost guarantee they have separate entrances as well.
Oh,
It's
definitely.
one of those deals.
New York City projects of this type
Uh-huh.
are famous for having what are called the pour doors.
Right. Yeah. Poor door.
But more often than not, funding for non-market housing is pretty complicated.
For example, if you look at the funding summary for this
I've gone
nonprofit
into
apartment
this
in
on
Cold
my
Harbor,
the stuff around Albany,
Yeah.
where the housing is not cheap, and for this new units in Troy, and the amount of grants and the amount of labor that it goes into from the nonprofit side to acquire all of the money is amazingly complex, because they have to get it from, as this guy shows, 10 different sources, and it's such a mess. And I absolutely hate it. And it's why I would not go into this sector. You know, I was like, well, I could have a career as an architect for nonprofits or something like that, or only do nonprofit work. But it was so complicated. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah.
And it's also
I
kind of
hear ya.
it's a disincentive to doing any of it.
Right.
Even opening a community-run grocery store, like a nonprofit grocery store in the South End, which is a food desert, to solve the issue of the food desert, at least for one neighborhood, also required required 6 different funding sources, one of them being the county,
Jesus.
but also like grants from banks and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and the usual stuff. But it's like, why is it from 5 places? Why can't it
Yeah.
just be, why not from one?
Why is it so complicated? Right.
Yeah, why is
Well,
it so
I mean,
complicated?
in general, this is why the call that diehard capitalists always have to, well, you can do your socialism and nothing's stopping you from doing it. Well, the
Yeah,
system
fuck
is set
you.
up against you.
No,
It's
fuck
baked
you.
into the system to not do it that way.
Yeah, exactly. To have your non-market alternative.
Right. So that's why you can't just do it.
You'll see that it took a mix of 4 different grants,
God.
selling life leases for some tenants, personal donations, money from foundations, money from fundraising events, and a bank loan.
Wait, hold on. Maybe you know the answer to this, but what is a partner life lease?
Partner life lease.
PAL, partner life lease. Does that mean you have to be there for a certain number of years? Like sign on to like a 20, 30-year lease? Or what?
Maybe. Why don't you go back a few seconds and maybe
Sure.
what was the things he said? He didn't list everything.
You'll see that
on
it took
list.
a mix of 4 different grants, selling life leases for some tenants, personal
life
donations,
leases.
money from
Life
foundations,
leases.
money from fundraising events, and a bank loan. Oh, and they also got the land for $10. If you can't tell already, raising all that money from all those different sources takes a lot of work. And it's really impressive that someone pulled it off. But that is not the process for how you build a lot of non-market housing. So
And when you
what
look
many
at like the
rightfully-
fundraising events, like why even do the fundraising? Like it's such a scrap of the money that's actually required. And it makes people feel like doing bake sales or whatever fundraising events is like really contributing to like getting these things done. When really it's just like 5% of any funding of anything.
Yeah,
It's
just
like
drop
it's
in the bucket.
really dues pays for it, or loans or whatever. And so yeah, to answer your question about the life leases, it really was like a lifelong lease of your like a mortgage. Like you're gonna rent for 30 years, and it's the equivalent of a mortgage. So yeah, I mean essentially these are gonna be their apartments.
That's crazy. So what would you think about
That's
the
how a
idea
lot of co-housing works. That's usually how a lot of co-housing works, by the way, because you're not going to get the funding if you're not going to get a kind of an upfront, like, or at least know that you're going to get, like, you can factor in that money.
Yeah. So I mean, what are some other models of doing it? Could we start a worker cooperative and instead of having profit, put all of that money towards something else, like building housing or something like that? How else do you do it?
As a prefigurative way?
Yeah.
That's the thing, because starting like a business, like a co-op, or doing the things that co-op, like I think we could look at Co-op Jackson, where they had anchor businesses where, meaning they were co-ops that were tied into an established anchor, like a hospital. So they were businesses that would contract. So they're not tied to the market forces. They're tied to the fact that there's a hospital, and the hospital could be state funded, or it's just something that's always going to be there, as long as we have a society. And so it means that they have constant work and thus constant surplus coming in. And one of them was like a laundry service.
Yeah.
And with that, you do eventually invest in housing. And sometimes you can make it kind of a hybrid where if you work at one of these, you get the housing. Like your rent, part of your paycheck is the rent. And you're working together.
Oh, cool.
There was the group in Troy called Margination. They didn't last because of internal strife, but otherwise they had a fun. They were doing pretty good at getting funds from tech bros and then using that to start non-market housing where they're going to rent apartments for $300.
Nice.
Because that was truly like, that's not where the surplus is going to come from. But it was also a matter of the people they were also kind of a co-op mill. They wanted to start as many co-ops as possible, even if they're just one person. And Yeah, and one of the co-ops was their construction business, basically, doing the construction on the buildings and the rehabs. But their next step was to rehab a warehouse as a co-op incubator, and that was where they left off before imploding, because anarchists just don't know how to organize.
Unfortunately, that has been our bane. Yeah.
Or rather, they a personal commune is not a good basis for figurative economics, I guess.
Yeah.
Because they're following the neoliberal tact of family is the cornerstone of the economy, but actually it isn't. So the family's drama got in the way. And once 3 or 4 people leave the house, it just falls apart for personal reasons.
And welcome in, Raiders. Thank you, Subversive History, for the raid.
Oh, cool.
I'm not actually familiar with your channel, so I'm going to give you a follow now, too. It looks like a stream dedicated to the anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist struggles throughout history.
Maybe
Awesome.
We should maybe watch one of their videos.
Yeah. We'll check that out sometime.
How about next time?
Well, yeah, definitely next time. We got an agenda this time. But yeah, we'll keep you in mind for future streams. So thank you so much.
Let's wrap this one up.
Absolutely. So we're looking at cooperative housing for those just joining, and
non-market housing.
Non-market housing as a
They
potential
happen to be
alternative.
co-ops, but they could also be church built or
Sure.
what have you.
But just we're looking at alternatives to market-based housing to solve the housing crisis. So there you have it.
Concluded is that creating more non-market housing will ultimately require more government funding. And the thing is, until very recently, our federal government basically stopped funding this sort of housing. If you look at a graph of new non-market housing units funded by Ottawa over the years, you can see that there is a 2-decade period where almost no new non-market housing was funded at all. Why we stopped investing in non-market housing is a very complex story for another time. But what's clear is that here in Canada, we've kind of assumed that the private market can meet our housing needs, that for-profit developers will compete with each other to offer us housing at the best price, without much government assistance. And before we assess non-market housing as a solution, I think it's pretty important that we understand that private market first, and why it's not really working out.
Nice.
Private markets are pretty good at providing consumer goods like computers and t-shirts in the sense that when people want more of these items, the companies...
This is where I was in
It would be wonderful if housing...
08, I think. 08, 09 in my political formulations.
Sure.
The whole the private market really isn't good for this, or rather it's good for shoes, but it's not good for housing. But then I was like, well, why is it good for shoes? Is it good for shoes? And then because I'm just assuming that a state or
because we have abundance and cheapness
socialist
to the consumer.
But that's before I knew what a socialist enterprise could or is.
Oh
I didn't actually know what socialism was at the time. Only that there was this non-market alternative.
Right. Yeah.
But so it's not complete until you put in actual socialist politics.
Yeah, I think I was just getting into fair trade stuff at that point.
Yeah.
So,
because that's what he mentions about you actually do need statism if you got to make this work. I don't think you can prefigure your way unless that prefiguration is its original intent is to build the political power for dual power, basically.
Right.
Or in the case of electoralism, to build the base for your alternative party.
Yeah.
If all the co-ops
remove those impediments,
funded the Green Party, we would have a war chest to win a congressional seat.
There you go.
Worked that way, but it almost never does. When there is demand for more housing, creating more of it is a complicated process. There are zoning bylaws in most cities that place heavy restrictions on how much housing can be built, and any changes to those rules bring out protests from local residents who are concerned about new buildings casting shadows, blocking views, or changing the character of their neighborhood. For example, in Kitsilano, a 5-story development that included non-market housing ended up being so controversial that it took 3 days of public hearings. One resident to oppose the building described it as dropping the ghetto on Kitsilano.
Oh my god.
All
The
that
worst
fuss
kind of
was over
NIMBYs.
a 5-story building, not the Burj Khalifa. And it really goes to show, building more housing supply is very difficult. As a result, there is a scarcity of housing today. Vacancy rates across BC hover around 1.5%. And at those rates, landlords can basically name their price. And recently, this has produced a concerning trend. Investors such as pension funds, REITs, and residual income bros have aggressively entered the housing market.
I like that
And in many
phrasing.
cases,
Residual
these investors
income
want to
bros.
buy these properties to build
Yeah.
new housing.
Yeah. AKA landlords.
But that's kind of that's the creativeness of this guy.
Right.
Or the urbanity. They didn't have they don't have a creative bone in their presentation.
Mm-mm.
They don't use their own lingo.
They sure don't.
They're
Yeah.
just like they're just so professional.
They don't keep it fun. Yeah, they're just like just the facts.
Well, I think that they try to. I think they try to be fun with their tone sometimes, but like with the
Sometimes,
humor,
but
it just
yeah.
doesn't work.
It's not nearly as fun to watch their videos. I'll have to say that.
They buy them to take advantage of a low vacancy rate and raise rents. I think this CEO of a real estate investment firm said it best. We think there is a definite shortage of housing in Canada, and the good news for investors is that there is no easy solution in sight.
Yep, says it all there.
He
No
actually
capitalist
said
solution,
that.
but
When viewed this way, our housing crisis starts to look
But
more
again,
like a feature of the
capitalism
private housing market.
is the crisis.
Absolutely.
There's definitely the motto.
Plot
That's
twist.
radicalized me.
Capitalism
the most.
all along. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
for
that
sure.
radicalized me the most. It was an ad busters with capitalism is the crisis on the front.
Mhm.
Like shit. That makes all the sense.
Absolutely does.
Not a bug. So, is non-market housing the fix to all this? Well, yes and no. Many would argue that what we actually need to do is to fix the rules and barriers that are creating this housing shortage. And
Political
I think that's
revolution,
totally
yes.
fair.
Yeah.
In North America, we make it really difficult to build any housing, period. And even if we decide to build a lot of non-market housing, it will still run into those same barriers. Non-market housing still casts shadows, blocks views, and changes the character of the neighborhood. I think first and foremost, we need to change these rules and make it easier to build housing in general. But on top of that, evidence suggests that it isn't really a good idea to only focus on non-market housing to fix a housing crisis. Because if you only focus on non-market housing, you might end up with Hong Kong. The government here provides 46% of its population with non-market housing, but severely limits development in the private sector. Because of that, private sector rents in Hong Kong
So this guy isn't
are
a
some of the
socialist. This guy
highest
isn't
in the
like-
world, and people wait 6 years on average to get into non-market housing. Non-market housing is not a silver bullet
But I
solution
think
that we
Hong
can
Kong
pursue
is an
while-
unfair comparison for any other
Yeah.
nation state, considering their size. There really is a lack of land in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And
True enough.
there's a lot of things, other
There's
things
nowhere to really
going
go.
on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things
Mhm.
going on in Hong Kong.
For
So I think it's sort of a stretch in these last minutes of this video to kind of make you still need both sides, both
Mhm.
I mean both market and non-market, and that he actually ends with the kind of same conclusion of like, well, we just need to over the urbanity, actually, despite being more woke, so to speak. He still
definitely
ends
gets it a
with,
lot
well,
better.
we just need to build more housing, and that means lower, changing the restrictions and regulations of government, which
That's unfortunate.
right, where it's like saying we need to change the way the rules work, but that's not code for political revolution. You don't like something where you need a new government. Although I suppose if right libertarians took government to do everything that the market to change the regulations in the way that
Mhm.
where housing is no longer restricted in how you can build it, I guess that is also a political revolution of a type.
Yeah.
But you need the Libertarian Party to come to power or gain a majority or be a force. But their success would also mainly mean also the Green Party's success. So, that would be the new binary. That would be my ideal binary,
Yeah, definitely be better than what we got.
But yeah, it's kind of complicated because now the Libertarians have a left wing. But
True enough, yeah. Socialist Libertarian, or the Socialist Caucus of the Libertarian Party.
And this is as the Greens are attempting to cut off our right wing, which are left libs, which is interesting.
Yeah, just.
But it's also part of a wider, recalibration, similar to the 70s, where in there being out socialists or a left that is class conscious, you get all of these people who were lumped into the label left for the last 40 years, who really, as far as economics and philosophy go, shouldn't have been. New Agers and all the people who were the left, but were actually reactionary the whole time.
Right.
And that's why we call them left libs. They say they're left wing because they're anti-corporate or anti-consumerist, but the reason
They're not really.
is not because they're in solidarity with workers.
No.
But because they just feel bad and maybe with New Agers it's purity.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's also very much an individualist streak. Like they just don't want anyone to tell them what to do. They don't care if other people get told what to do. They just
if they're left
want the
libertarian,
man off their back. Yeah.
But then they easily become like right libertarians, or at least they really do act like it. When they're off gridders.
Mm-hmm.
Ignoring the rest of the housing market. It's all interconnected. If there's a shortage of housing in the private market, it will only place more pressures on non-market housing. But with all that being said, I ultimately think that non-market housing is still a critical part of fixing our housing crisis. I think to some extent, building housing supply is always going to have constraints. It isn't as simple as printing t-shirts and making computers. It will often be fundamentally at odds with other priorities we hold in our cities. Yes, some kind of trivial ones like protecting views, but also more understandable priorities.
Now, the
like
Soviets
protecting
attempted to
wetlands
manufacture
or preventing-
housing like a t-shirt, and that's how they were able to house everybody and not have any housing crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that.
You could do that, yeah. And looking at this cookie cutter suburban American, or I suppose Canadian, capitalist nonetheless, enclave. Yeah. Is it really that much worse to have a Soviet bloc?
I wonder if we can say that Venezuela has a housing crisis. They just built 8 million new homes. The government did.
Did they?
So, oh yeah. So it was it was a 10-year project to basically build out, basically to replace favelas in the capital and so on. It's still probably not like all they need, but it's something. It's something they've been doing.
That's cool. Yeah, I had not heard about that. I only hear about Venezuelan memes anymore. So, yeah.
Well, there's no chance Guaido is going to, it's Guaido's the joke. And the U.S. government has tried too many times to, disrupt their government and completely failed. So I think as far as them being in our media, sphere, they're not, because the government stopped trying to take over the country. Our media doesn't care anymore. There's no problem in Venezuela because there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
Sort of.
Interesting.
That's what it feels like.
Brawl. And besides, there are other limits to housing supply that are frankly outside of our control. In Metro Vancouver, our land is limited by mountains and water on every side. That will always create the potential for housing to be scarce, and for people to exploit that scarcity by making housing as expensive as possible. Given that reality,
I think we should be treating non-market housing as an important counterbalance, something that limits people's ability to exploit a housing shortage in two key ways: adding more supply and setting rents that help to stabilize the overall housing market. Sending a reminder to all of us that housing is ultimately for people,
Rent control?
not profits.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm here to put my life savings of, several $1,000s into my Van City checking account. Because, like I've hinted throughout this video, Van City and the Van City Community Foundation actually play a pretty important role in helping non-market
Is this
housing
a
developments get off
ad?
the ground.
Together, they created the
Yeah, it kind of seems like it.
They
I
are a
mean,
credit union. It's
For,
fine.
for a credit union, so hey, it's,
do,
you know.
do support credit unions or
Right.
community loan funds. They have like no return on investment, but the community loan fund does in fact
Does good things, yeah.
fund co-ops and is a source of funding that isn't a bank. So we're going to shift gears quite a lot to more of an off-grid. What's the next thing I gave you?
Next thing is episode 1, A New Way of Thinking Beyond Capitalism and Socialism by Ownership Economy.
Okay. So, yeah. So this is a cold watch for me. Cool. But we're definitely got to do this next time as well, since, we only have less than an hour left.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait. No, unless we're going to go.
No, we have less than that. We got 48
Damn.
minutes left.
God, it just goes right by. But we're always starting at 7:30. Is there a way we can actually start on time? I don't know.
It's difficult because Sunday's the day I see my kids, and I usually get back here and just wolf down my dinner, and then it's straight into streaming. So
all right, yeah.
I'm
not complaining.
Yeah, maybe at some point we could just move it to a different day of the week when I'm not so busy. But
that could be
for now.
Yeah, that could be what we do. So basically, let's talk utopias. Since we've been enmeshed in the capitalist realist housing issues, or viewpoints. So let's talk utopias. And I have no idea how this is actually going to play out because this is a cold watch. But this is one I was doing a search for resource-based economy, and this kind of came up later in the list of the search output. So let's see how this is. This is, I say beyond capitalism and socialism. There's always types of utopians or left libs who, they're like, they use the same rhetoric. It's basically, keep in mind that the moderates or the technocrats will have taken the phrase neither left nor right, but forward. They actually took that from left libs.
I hate that.
And other progressives, they used it first. The Green Party in Canada, they would say they're not left or right, but forward. They've been saying that for 20 years or longer. It's sort of actually what any Green Party person or similar type of activist who does not want to be a socialist, does not identify with the left for reasons of career or just worldview, that communism failed and leftism just isn't, when they grew up in the new left, the Marxist, bros were, horrible to them, and talking about certain women or minorities where they were ignored or just like it wasn't intersectional. So they're like, I'm not the left. Those assholes are authoritarian or they're tankies, and then you kind of get that sometimes with some anarchists or people like Vosh, where it seems like they don't even want to identify as the left half the time because like, oh, the left are crazy, they're stupid, I hate the left. All these other leftist streamers, they're assholes.
Yeah, they suck.
They suck. Yeah, they're all these other leftist streamers. All of them seem to hate the left because they interact with just other online leftists who just bitch talk each other.
Right.
So anyway, I just want to get that out of there. And so let's just see what this. It's just 7 minutes. Let's see what it has in store for us.
Let's do it.
And then we'll go into resource-based economy.
Nice. Building an ownership economy. Episode 1, New Way of Thinking. Cool.
Our society today tends to accept without question the notion that there are only two ways to structure an economy: capitalism and socialism. Some people would say that these two systems are mutually exclusive and we have to choose one or the other. Others would argue that we can mix them and the key is to find the right balance. But I think most everyone would agree that capitalism and socialism are on opposite ends of a spectrum.
Those are
So as
social
we move toward
democrats.
one, we move away from the other,
Yeah,
vice
market
versa.
socialists.
The problem is that this paradigm is completely false. By selecting a position along this spectrum, we think we've made the critical choice, when in fact we're just following the well-beaten path, while ignoring a third option, a road less traveled.
Oh,
In order
a third position?
Maybe they're not aware that they're using well-worn rhetoric.
Uh-huh. Well,
That the rhetoric all the rhetoric they're using is actually well-beaten and well-traveled. So that's the irony of this rhetoric here.
Yeah.
It's
I'll
funny.
see where this goes.
In order to really understand this third option, we have to break free from traditional thinking. Our
Out of the
natural
box.
tendency as human beings
literally
is to
out of the
evaluate
box,
new
yeah.
ideas within the context of existing
all new
paradigms. But new ideas require new patterns of thought. We can begin by
That
re-examining
require
traditional
copious amounts of
assumptions.
acid.
Yeah, there you go. Not going to break into a
You know,
true third way until we do a bunch of
as
acid.
the subulation puts it, the antidote to capitalist realism is acid communism.
There you go.
Acid communism.
I'm not sure what word that's censored there, James, but you can space it out and it will still.
Shit.
If you space out each letter, I don't think it censors that word. I didn't set it to censor any curse words.
I'm pretty sure you
just
typed
slurs.
stars, but
Oh, that could be.
Capitalism and socialism are based on two major philosophies or ways of thinking
Gotcha.
that dominate our society. The first way of thinking has root in classical liberalism and the Enlightenment. This philosophy treats economics as a science. It holds the view that there are natural laws that govern the economy and create equilibriums, and that optimal results occur when markets operate without interference. The outward objective of this philosophy is liberty, but at its core is the
now this is the
principle
big
of
lie.
karma, or the law of
And I'm not quite sure how to explain how it's a lie, but maybe it's just that we're competing over who is really following and representing Enlightenment values, because the left is very much a product of the Enlightenment. This, the French Revolution, equality, liberty, fraternity. This is the leftist project. This is our project. It's not the liberal project. It's not the capitalist project, because all of that stuff was forming before the French Revolution. Socialism and everything we represent was formed after, with industrialism. But so it's hard to say like how it's a lie, but it is to say like the ideals of the American and French revolutions were liberal bourgeois revolutions, but the goals and the populism of the populist side of those revolutions, which were represented by Haitian Revolution and so on. That's maybe it's two sides of the same coin, and maybe we're competing for the legacy and what it really means to be the Enlightenment and rational and law-based. But I think the dichotomy is that there's the rational Enlightenment and then the romantic counter to it, which is conservatism, is reactionary. The reactionary worldview is romanticism. Right. So it's like, and this is kind of where probably it's going, or maybe it's kind of what it's based on, that you have the rational Enlightenment values, which capitalism and socialism both represent or both products of. But then you have the third view, or the real opposition to both zany systems that bring hardship to humanity, is romanticism. And that's how basically all New Age, all New Left stuff, and everything in the neoliberal era is romantic, including metacratic technocrats. They're also operating in a romantic, even though they're all like, we're data and logical, and no, it's actually all romantic. It's all reactionary, which is interesting. But it's definitely not the Enlightenment project.
Very much.
the harvest.
Interesting.
This is the idea that rewards should be proportional to efforts, or lack thereof. An example is the American dream. It's the idea that everyone has the chance to achieve something
was
through
a
hard
lie.
work and perseverance. It's
Yeah. Well, also, like, this is the capitalist side of things they're trying to describe. Like,
Yeah, they're describing the capitalist
business
side.
but business owners from the onset have never set things up where reward is proportional to effort. They like to pretend it, but it's never ever been that way.
When I say it's a lie, I'm referring to the counter phrase. It's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it, and that's where being woke refers to understanding that capitalist mythology, and that this American dream is built on a foundation of enslavement, genocide of indigenous peoples, and stealing land, and treating everything as a commodity. And that includes stealing the labor of any kind of workers, imported or otherwise. But mostly imported, either through enslavement or like the Irish or the Sicilians, a matter of the poorest of people who are, in a position where they can't, and they have to accept whatever wages you give them.
Yeah.
sounds great. But there is an unspoken corollary to this, which is, if you have money and a nice house, then you must have worked hard and earned it, and if you don't have those things, then you must be lazy. Because karma reacts to each person differently according to his or her actions, this paradigm tends to be individualistic, action and outcome oriented.
Using karma is also a very New Ager thing because you're using a Eastern philosophy word from Buddhism instead of a Calvin. This is all from Calvinism, by the way. So that capitalist side is Calvinism, and which is why you have a section of tech bros who are actually identifying themselves as a atheistic Calvinism without a God. That they believe in a predestination for themselves as upper class.
Yeah.
Problem with this worldview is that it's a rationalization, an excuse to dominate, oppress, and exploit the labor of others. We can trace this back to Malthus and Darwin, who said that because the population is growing faster than vital resources.
Grouping in Darwin with Malthus, real big fucking problem with that, by the way.
Absolutely.
Real big problem with that. Darwin was not it's making that mistake that social Darwinism was actually from Darwin.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't.
I hate it when anyone does that.
No. That was reactionaries.
Malthus was pseudoscience. Malthus is pseudoscience. Darwin was actual science, a representative of Enlightenment values and progress, because he was very much a progressive at his time.
No.
Sources, there is a constant competition and struggle for survival. One day, therefore, that the wretched condition of the poor is simply a natural state.
I think they're pointing out that it was a capitalist interpretation of Darwin to say that, but the fact that he just framed Darwin as being the cause, though. I mean, no, he's not a cause of social Darwinism, because social Darwinism already existed, but it was through using Christian language. Darwin provided
divine right of kings
about
and such,
it in a secular way because God was dying. But that's it's bigger than him or any particular scientist.
For sure.
Nothing that the rich need to be concerned about. This thinking also points to the division of labor as a justification for inequality, claiming that it's natural for some people to sit at the top of the food chain in an ownership or managerial role because that's what they're suited for, whereas other people are suited for a subservient role doing manual labor. I feel like making videos like this,
he's not actually going to spend any time on what the third way is, because he's spending a third of his video explaining capitalism and debunking it in a way, in a poor way, but not in a materialist way, but whatever, in a New Ager way. And then he's going to debunk socialism in a New Ager way, romantic way. And then he'll have a minute left to say, this new way of thinking isn't,
There's neither, and
we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what
yeah,
we'll see.
we'll see what he says.
We'll see. I think we know, but
The second way of thinking has root in the ideas of Karl Marx and other progressive thinkers. This philosophy sees the political and economic system as a natural progression over time, patterned after Hegel's dialectic. It's all about change. Change might be regarded as evolutionary adaptation, but often it's brought about through revolution, an ongoing process of questioning authority, disrupting
which is
the
also
current social
evolution,
system,
by the
taking
way. They're the same thing.
Mhm.
I don't know why these things are seen as dichotomies. Revolutions
Yeah.
are evolutionary. They are, like ruptures, right? But I mean, adaptive revolution occurs because the revolution is an adaptation of the set of circumstances.
Well, and two, capitalism became the dominant system through revolution as well.
And,
So,
and it was adaptation. Like these things came
Yeah,
about through
it's
a series
reaction
of adaptations.
to-
Yeah. Marx
to,
wasn't like capitalism
yeah.
is natural. I mean, it was a natural progression from feudalism is the point.
Mhm.
So as long as you have this hierarchical system, it's going to evolve a certain way. But I mean, it evolved a certain way because of certain circumstances in the medieval era, in the Middle Ages.
power from those who oppress, and restructuring society to be more egalitarian. The outward objective of this philosophy is equality, but at its heart, it's about acceptance and love of all humanity despite our flaws. As such, it tends to focus on the collective good rather than the individual. It recognizes that every human being has
Those are called
unconditional claim on
solidarity.
natural rights.
Yeah,
Just
right.
call it, just saying it's solidarity is the word for that.
Sure.
The problem with this worldview is that it's dependent on the use of power, typically government authority, to enforce its objectives,
Capitalism isn't.
thus taking away the free will of
Yeah, right.
That's not a problem for socialism.
No,
That's a problem
yeah.
for nation states, I guess.
But I mean,
Any-
capitalism, as so many socialists have pointed out, capitalism cannot function without government.
So
This
he
is
was
a ridiculous dichotomy.
His critique of capitalism was that it was reliant on mythology.
Yeah,
And
right.
socialism doesn't. It's actually honest. It doesn't need mythology. It doesn't lie to people,
Mhm.
but it uses state
Power.
statism, state power, I guess, or
Yeah.
people
Which
power. People power
and,
is
yeah.
also a type of power. So
Right.
it's also viewing power as being this, on the whole, negative thing in and of itself, and that the only way you can have a fair or free society is to devolve power along anarchist lines, I guess.
Sure.
So maybe his third way is anarchism.
I mean, that could be,
I
but,
very
but yeah,
much
he's
doubt
right now.
those
He's
will
really
call it
flattening
that.
out.
He's not going to call it that, though,
No,
because
Yeah, he's really-
anarchism is a part of leftism. It is a part of socialism.
it's part of socialism.
not-
Yeah,
But it's treated as separate. That's how you get libertarian,
Yeah, yeah.
right libertarians.
Yeah,
that
right.
anarchy is actually a capitalist ideology or something like that.
right. Yeah, he's very much flattening socialism too into only being what occurred in the Soviet Union and China.
Oh, he's
and
doing it
so
in 2
forth.
minutes. He's doing it in 2 minutes. I mean,
Yeah,
not
I
to.
guess.
But
I
I just want to point out, flattening it as the problem with socialism is it uses power, which
Yeah,
isn't a negative to me, and it isn't a negative if you believe in states. But
yeah.
if you're,
Well, if you believe in the equality of people, then yeah, using power to get that ends
anyway,
is okay.
of individuals. This creates a contradiction. It values equality, but requires a form of dominance and oppression in order to achieve that equality. As one form of oppression
Well,
replaces
worker-
another, the effort to restore
Yeah,
it's a worker state. Yes, it's using it to achieve equality because it's lowering one to raise another, and then they're equal.
right. But if you really have the people having meaningful control over their government, and you have state socialist experiment, then no, it doesn't require constant revolution and devolve constantly into tyranny and stuff like that.
Or
if you
rather, the
have-
next revolution would be an anarchist one to devolve the
Yeah,
power
yeah,
of that
okay,
state.
sure.
Now that you've solved the classless problem, you then solve the state problem.
Yeah,
And then
there you go.
can solve the money problem.
Yeah,
Because that's the thing with a lot of these utopias that'll be the theme I think I have with all of these is that communism. This is our overall goal and project. Is stateless, classless, and moneyless. And the real argument we're always having is really what order to do these three things.
Mhm.
Because what you pick is going to determine what your strategy is. Like if you think statelessness is the first goal, then obviously you're going to have an anarchist approach. If you think moneyless is the problem, then you need to think about how you change the currency problem. And do you use the state to do that? Is it something you have to be prefigurative about? It's and first and so on with the class issue is
Yeah, well, and yeah, if you think class is the problem, then it could be
it's
a
class
state solution of a worker state.
or it's made
So-
by the fact that the state, uses constituent force.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe it's all one the same and you have to do all three things at once.
Mhm.
But that's something that even in practice with the socialist governments is they recognize it's got to take 100 transitionary steps to do even one of those things.
Mhm.
Where the CCP, if you're being generous about their motives, it's like we got to raise the standard of living enough, and then we can, to lessen class, and then we're solving the class problem first. The state problem, not a really problem. We're going to use the oppressive structure of the state, and we're obviously using currency and money because that's a world thing, and we can't really go for that first. So we're going to work on the class issue and try to raise everybody up and raise standards of living, and that's kind of where they get, people can put up with the censorship and whatever, as long as those standards of living keep going up. But others see it the opposite way, where it's like, well, power is for its own sake, and if you build high-speed rail, it's only to buy people off and bribe the population and raise their standard of living so they'll obey you,
so they can be controlled.
But I see it as, well, they're only able to do all of those fabulous things because they keep a lid on dissent and what have you. Because otherwise they would end up like Libya or what have you, other developing countries that have remained developing.
Sure. All right.
Or balance must be constant and ongoing. These two ways of thinking tend to operate in our society today as self-existent dogmas that don't question their own principles. They may appear to be opposites, but they are actually similar in at least three ways.
Import, right?
First, they are both materialistic, meaning they are both focused only on satisfying material needs as opposed to non-material values. This might seem obvious, yet many people today would say that simply having more material goods doesn't necessarily make us happier. Second, both philosophies...
No, but it's hard to be happy if you're struggling to have certain basic necessities. So, yeah, you're right.
That's where the romantics lose me, or should lose, and mostly lose everybody. It's why they can't organize working people, and why they don't even try. They know that their romantic worldview of, well, money can't make you happy. Greed is the, is a terrible value that you should not have at all. Even when it's something you actually do need, or everyone wants something that they can't have. You get propaganda like Enemy at the Gates, where like people, you have the guy being like, we can't be equal because we're unequal in love. You ever see Enemy at the Gates?
I do. I
hated
a long
the
time
ending
ago
so much. I hated the the way
yeah.
the characters worked out, but you have the guy who's like, it's a love triangle, and the guy basically like, I don't believe in socialism anymore because I love a woman who won't love me back, and she loves you, and we're not equal. So,
man,
I'm gonna so he sacrifices himself, but it's just
what the hell?
It was so painful.
That's ridiculous. I don't remember that at all. But this was long before any political awakenings in me. So
I watched it more recently.
I should probably watch it again. That'd be interesting.
It's
I do recall it as being one of the first depictions of in a sense,
the Eastern Front in American media
in a positive light. Yeah, as though it was actually doing a courageous thing, standing up to the Nazis.
But at the same time, no, they were doing a backslap every moment of it, though.
Yeah.
Showing the blocking troops as mowing down their own people. The supplying of the Red Army. Like, look,
Hmm.
yes, they were undersupplied for the first
Yeah.
week, but then they got the supplies and then they were equipped. That's the real history of that, by the way. And it was hard to supply people across the river. It was really difficult. There was a lot of, anyway. But yeah. Oh, and the whole shooting of the generals and the way Khrushchev is when he's played by Bob Hoskins. It's a great portrayal, I think. But
Yeah, definitely.
it doesn't. But it's just depicting the Soviet Union as being also a totalitarian state, and this is, it's kind
True.
of backhanded, and it also kind of shows how like the hero, the sniper, was a dedicated, very pro, I'm doing this for Papa Stalin, but that is not the depiction in the movie. He's kind of depicted as a neutral, so to speak.
Mhm.
Just being
sure.
a good hunt, just a good hunter from the steppes. And that he's conscripted. He's shown as being conscripted in his train full of soldiers who are just like, what's going on? What's going on? And then they just drag him off the train and throw him on the boat. He volunteered. He volunteered. He wanted to fight, and he was already stationed in the east, and then he was transferred to Stalingrad because they obviously need the manpower there. But I mean, he was actually put on the sniper team and then sent to Stalingrad. So he was,
Yeah.
It wasn't by
I
accident
no
or happenstance that he became a sniper.
Sure.
But
Yeah,
it's almost an American thing to say he had merit and he was promoted to being on the sniper team.
Sure. Gotcha. All right, let's wrap up this video here.
These fail to place moral responsibility on the individual, while conservatives take firm moral positions on social issues.
What? Having solidarity with your fellow workers is not putting a moral responsibility on them? Thinking about everyone in society is not a moral
Go back.
Yeah.
Seconds. I need a context here.
Buying material needs as opposed to non-material values. This might seem obvious, yet many people
What
today
about our
would say that
souls?
simply having more material goods doesn't necessarily make us happier. Second, both philosophies fail to place moral responsibility on the individual.
I disagree.
While conservatives take firm moral positions on social issues, the economy is considered to be basically amoral, and as long as basic ethical standards are met, nothing anyone does is wrong, and individuals have no responsibility for others.
What? Whoa, no.
Actually, there is no such thing as ethical business. It's just, is it legal or not? And obviously there are many things you can do illegally that are, still considered okay. But
Yeah, but he was saying the same thing is applied to socialism. Others.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the fact that he's applying this thinking
that doesn't make any sense
to both. Yes, they're both like this. That's
the foundation of.
You're not thinking like a romantic, Zach. You have to think like a romantic.
I guess not. But I mean, the foundation that everyone is created equal, that is a moral judgment, that everyone deserves to have as much opportunity and freedom as possible in their life. That's a moral position.
Well,
these are not just logical conclusions.
Say we're materialists, that means we don't care about anything spiritual. I mean, it's just we're atheists and we hate the religious. That's
care
about straw man anyway.
I know, but in reality, it's that we care about as much personal flourishing as is humanly possible.
Which is was meant by the soul, is good for the soul,
Right. So that's silly. That's
unless you are a Calvinist or some type of twisted Catholic, where suffering and being poor is very pious. It's a good thing for your soul because you're closer to Christ, which was Mother Teresa's thing.
Sure. Oh God, yeah, the pious suffering. Ugh. Never could buy into that sort of a thing.
Progressives, the moral imperative is to achieve greater equality and overcome oppression. but these objectives tend to be pursued at a systemic level rather than through individuals making right or wrong choices.
How do we change the system without
Right. So don't apply individual
action?
morality to political movements. Don't do that. Don't, or economic systems. Like it's don't apply individual moral philosophy, because that's where you're tripping yourself up. I think this particular person, ownership economics or whatever it is.
Right.
So let's see what's beyond this.
And finally, both sides tend to see economic outcomes as being a function of government involvement. Progressives want more, conservatives want less. This leads people to turn to politics to achieve the solutions that they want, because they don't think they themselves are capable of achieving any kind of change.
The third way is to be
overall
non-political. It is to be a New Ager. New Agers hate being political.
Do away with.
They don't believe in politics, and that's been. It's funny how these videos are made as if this hasn't been the trend, the solution to the problems of the 20th century. That Americans said, "Oh, okay, the problem is being political, so we should all just be as non-political as possible," and that's what has been the paradigm. And then you have these assholes, romantic assholes, who say, "Oh no, we need a new paradigm," which happens to be the existing paradigm.
Yeah,
it is the status quo. It is that's the crazy. It makes me crazy, or rather, I mean, it's why I would point out it's an adjustment that I'm happy for the adjustment, the recalibration that New Agers are actually understanding that they're actually very pro status quo, and they hate this talk of class and socialism. And I encountered it actually very recently with a guy who would say, like, "Oh, I don't believe in class. I don't think it's right to say there's different classes." I'm like, yeah, but we do have different classes. And if if we want a world where there aren't any, then we need to fight that.
We gotta do something about it.
We need to fight that classishness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Enlightened centrists always believe that they can be apolitical and just stand.
By the way, this guy wasn't an enlightened centrist. He's very much a guy who's like telling me, like, he's listening to me and he likes what I say. And it's like, man, if more people heard you, you'd be doing really well. A few times and you would run, you would win for mayor or something like that. He said, like, there's a lot of people out there that would like what you're saying. And like, that's encouraging. And I do believe that, like, if we just outreach enough, the problem is outreaching takes money unless you have some community infrastructure, which is why I do community radio. And this was a conversation. I was talking about the project. I was talking about why I do it. And he was like, yeah, that's cool.
Nice. Well, at least you got through to him a little bit then.
I'm just ranting about the little quip at the end. And that's off. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to talk about class consciousness.
Yeah.
I won't go that far yet. But the breadcrumbs, and we go back to the previous videos where you don't say the S word.
For sure. Yeah, right.
Or you drop it
of the traditional
see,
dichotomy.
If he hates it or not. And he was neutral.
There you go.
Didn't react. So I'm like, oh, okay. That's why I thought I could mention class struggle, but that was too far.
It's funny.
Is that we see economics as something external to ourselves, something we have to adapt to and respond to, rather than something we create through our own actions. It also pits us against each other. We can see that the core values of both sides are, in many ways, opposites, but we can't really say that one is better than the other. They're both good. The problem happens when we separate them and see the two as being mutually exclusive. As we externalize and operationalize this separation as a society, the systems that emerge are incompatible with each other. And simply mixing capitalism and socialism doesn't reconcile the two values. We can think of this in terms of male and female. Simply mixing the two creates something androgynous. The mixture is what we have today, and it's not working. A better analogy would be to imagine...
In what world do we have a mixture of capitalism and socialism? Just the idea of having any social programs that all that shit counts as socialism?
Yeah. Well, as I said, what he's viewing both as being...
just government, I guess.
Status, the status paradigm. The status paradigm's a problem, but again, in this last minute, he's got to throw in some turf rhetoric too. Totally so. Not. I can tell it's like not on purpose, but like just saying like you can't mix this genders.
Can't mix them. You still got gender. Well, okay.
Economic systems, gender, these are comparable things.
Yeah, right.
But again, he's making a mistake of being a left lib, of that like a social democrat or democratic socialist. Like this is as left as you can go. You're still very statist. You're still within a capitalist paradigm. Yeah. Anyway, last 3 seconds. Because how is he explaining the third way? Is he explaining the third way?
Capitalism and socialism having a baby. Through the union of two opposites, something new and different is born.
The baby has a gender, though.
He's being Hegelian, but it's weird that.
What?
Well, no, he's critiquing the Hegelian way. He's saying that people are being Hegelian by saying that you can mix the two and that solves it. He's saying that doesn't solve it. So what does solve it? Let's see.
There is a third way, an alternative to capitalism and socialism. Though this option tends to be overlooked, it has a strong foundation and a long history. But this new system can only come into being as we set aside traditional paradigms, relax our knee-jerk response, and begin to adopt a new way of thinking.
Oh, okay, this was just the intro. Oh, okay, sorry, Zach. This is the problem with cold watching. Is it's a series, and this was just the intro explaining. Sorry. You know what? This is fine. We just need to watch the rest, I guess. But I can assume based on that intro, it's all New Age claptrap. Maybe we skip to a new synthesis, but it's odd because he was just critiquing that you don't synthesize; they're incompatible.
Yeah, what the hell?
It's weird because it sounds like the argument that I make at the beginning of a Paracom lecture. But in that case, so it's not socialism, it's state socialism that's being put as the 20th century alternative to capitalism, which hasn't fully panned out, or rather doesn't meet American standards of like an alternative. Because Paracom is still communist and still very much requires state action as a transitionary step. It's not saying you don't have state socialism, but you need to, if you're going to do socialist planning, it needs to be democratic, participatory, actual worker management, not bureaucrat management, which is sort of the intention of past socialist movements, but they didn't occur that way. Though it's just by the way power worked in the 20th century and today too, but maybe the internet changes up and then our technical change, social change even changes up how we will do it. And Paracom is its own bag thing, and then we can go into that with the next.
Yeah.
Utopian.
I mean, it sounds very interesting.
What would be the next thing we should go on from there? The next link I put in was the resource-based economy, and it's not an entertaining video, I can tell you, because the voiceover is computer voice. There's a ton of these utopian videos are made by people who, I guess, don't have a good reading voice or don't practice it. So they use a computer voice. They do the anonymous kind of thing because they're maybe going for that kind of aesthetic of even though the original Zeitgeist movies were voiced by the guy, what's his fucking name? It should come up. Peter Joseph, who is a charismatic kind of guy and pretty good leftist in my opinion, but doesn't come across that way. At least early on he didn't, but by 2015-16 he was reformulating everything along post-capitalist lines and being rather representing everything from the Zeitgeist pictures as like, this isn't, I'm not starting from conspiracy theory land, conspiracism. I'm actually coming at things from a Marxist point of view.
Sure.
But without using Marx, I think, which is odd, but again, breadcrumbs.
Welcome in, Trex 944. So, communism bad, get better theory. While you've made a compelling argument, I shall now reject all of the Marxist and anarchist literature throughout time and space and adopt what? now? Because you haven't. What's the better ideology? You're leaving me hanging, bro.
Yeah.
And I assume you're a bro. But thanks for the follow, Glazy, as well.
Cool.
We don't. I don't think we actually have time for another video tonight since it's getting
It's
close to
9:50.
that hour.
Yeah, sorry. I'm looking at. I keep thinking we go for 3 hours, and the clock
Yeah,
says
yeah.
2:20.
I know. Yeah.
Next time we'll cover eco-village utopianism and some more in resource-based economy and degrowth debates.
That'll be cool.
No more
It's been a while since
housing.
Been a while since I've delved into degrowth and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
we need to present
that's
what
cool.
degrowth on the left really is, and not whatever straw man people like Caleb Mopham or
they just tie it to Malthusianism,
or
which
other
is ridiculous.
I know,
Yeah.
but that's if that's
yeah.
if
I'm saying that's a
word,
ridiculous take. That's a ridiculous straw man.
From the rest of the online left, from Vosh to Demon Mama and the rest of those crews, if they don't, I haven't seen them talk logically or well about countering that straw man. So
yeah,
I think it's up to us
for sure. Cool. I look forward to that. That's exciting. What do you think? Do you want to do next weekend, or do you want to do a 2-week thing? What I don't know how much you got going on in your
we can do
other
2
endeavors.
Weeks. We can do
2 weeks. All right. Well, I look forward to 2 weeks from now. Tune in. Usually we start around. We try to start around 6 p.m. Central Time, but usually it's about 6:30. Lately, just been my scheduling conflict. But about that time, tune on in. The best way to make sure you're alerted is to follow wherever you're looking at this right now. And that way you'll get alerted next time we go live. But thank you so much, Dan, for bringing these videos. I had a lot of fun, as always. And look very much forward to the next one. Anything you want to mention or plug between the Three Left Show or What's Left in Albany?
Yeah, just check out 3lefts.news. That is where you'll find
News.
my backlog of 146 episodes of leftist strategy, theory, but mostly just talking practice and strategy, using news stories and whatever, but
sure,
alternating between different topics and so on. But I have a lot of fun making that show. And now I'm moving into, I suppose it'll be more interviews, because I think doing the show alone, just trying to read news stories, but like all of the local news stories in my area, they're just too short, not enough content, and they're not interesting enough. So I think I need people on the ground, people in my neighborhood, or people I meet to talk, and then I'll ask them their opinion, and then I can give my left-wing opinion, and it'll be more natural and maybe make more sense. Because me just kind of trying to read the local Hearst newspaper and reacting to that as a leftist, it doesn't feel good. I don't like it. If I don't like it, then I can't expect anyone else to like it.
You can't put in the time for it. I get it.
You just getting tracks.
You're just getting better. Man. Oh, get fucked. Well, I suppose I will now.
Yes.
Left-wing opinion has no merit. Oh. I mean, really, you haven't told me what this better ideology is. You said the USSR was garbage and whatnot.
Yeah, they got shortages.
They got shortages like we've never had in the United States. Like we're not having food shortages now.
We just had baby formula.
Oh, capitalism, for example. Like we're having food shortages here. No, but we have.
No. He's saying capitalism is the better ideology.
Yeah, right. But he's saying we haven't had these shortages. Did you not live through COVID?
No. I think we haven't had real capitalism.
We haven't had real capitalism. Oh, I see. It was all the socialism in our current system that caused all those food shortages, not the greed of corporations.
America is getting far left, and that's why things are going. If there's any problems, it's definitely if there's any problems in America, it's because we're too far left. Yeah,
right. I guess that anarcho-Bidenism just went too far, didn't it? He's been pushed too far left to the point where he won't even support current striking railroad workers.
Yeah,
that fucking leftist Joe Biden.
No. Preventing the railroad strike is pro-worker because the railroad strike would have affected people's holidays. It would have affected they wouldn't have had Christmas. So You gotta save Christmas, and the railroad workers are the Grinch. So.
So you're saying, Trex, that we can have a pure capitalism if we just do away with that pesky government.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder how we're going to do things like, enforce contract law, build public utilities
All
that
right,
we all
we're not the
use.
majority report,
So-
Zach. We're not the. We're not. Trex can go to the majority report to do this argument.
Oh, it's so much fun. I'm sorry. I'm keeping you though, Dan. Thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time as
Good
always.
night.
And I will see you next time.
Leaving.
It's how the 1970s were crashed by unions who destroyed the U.S. economy. The unions. Oh my God, man. The unions destroyed the economy, not Reaganism. Okay, gotcha. I can disagree with your statement and be wrong. Pontiac still exists? What are you talking about? Reagan was an idiot. Yeah, Reaganomics marked the death knell of the union movement. Union membership has never been as high since then, and the quality of life for the average American family has gone down ever since. Not coincidentally, because we've done away with as much regulations, as much of the social safety net, as much support for unions as possible. So your average steel worker, especially a non-union one these days, can no longer afford to own their own house or buy all the products that they make and stuff like that. But look, you said Pontiac doesn't exist. Come on. You have to at least use real facts. Pontiac automobile. Let's see here. Pontiac was an American automobile owned. Okay. Yeah. Sold to Mexico, to GM, on and on. Cool. Discontinue. Okay. That has to do with unions? I don't understand the connection. Unions do not have a reasonably end goal in mind. They want the workers to work 1 second every year and get paid $10 million. Yeah, that's the end of unions. Not fair labor practices, not only firing with cause, not protection of benefits and pensions. These are not things that unions do, right? Unions don't kill economies. We had the strongest economy when we had the strongest unions because people could afford to buy the products that they were actually making. But come on, unions is not even socialism either. Unions are just a band-aid solution to mitigate some of the worst forces or the worst effects of capitalism, that being the gross exploitation of the working class. So, I mean, I guess if you view anything that has to do with collective action as they will keep demanding higher and higher wages. Yeah, that's how inflation works too. The prices for things go up and up and up. So you have to have higher wages or else you fall behind, as we have since when? Oh, since the end of the 1970s, when union membership started falling dramatically. You can specifically even pinpoint it to the busting of the air traffic controllers union strike. When Reagan broke that up, that was the end of the unions being the standard in America. Yeah, okay. When everything costs an arm and a leg, as it did during the height of unionism, which is not the case. It doesn't. Prices are going up now. Everything's costing an arm and a leg, despite very pathetic union participation in this country. I think we're still under 10%. Let's look at that. Union participation in the U.S. Let's see. Yeah, 10.3% of the U.S. workforce is unionized, and the vast majority of that is from the private sector. Or, I'm sorry, the public sector. There's a misspeak. A misspeech. I misspoke anyway. That's the point. There's always inflation, dude. There's inflation every year. What do you mean? Prices go up year after year. What? In fact, it's bad if we don't have inflation for a capitalist economy. deflation is pretty bad too. And stagnation is bad for capitalism. Always has to keep going up. There has to be more and more of it. Union participation is an irrelevant argument. The argument is that places that are unionized, are they harmed by them, not how widespread it is. Okay, but if most of our economy is not unionized, then saying that unions are responsible for all the bad stuff doesn't make any sense. Sure, most low-paying work today is service industry, for sure. A place that is finally starting to get unionized, which is great. These people are actually starting to make not even a minimum, not even a living wage yet. You know, we're talking about more like $15 an hour, which could have been a living wage 10, 15 years ago, but is not. Like you cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment at market rate anywhere in the country for even $15 an hour. It's more like $20 to $22 an hour to be able to afford that. So, and half our country cannot afford it by themselves. Why shouldn't it get unionized? Why should people not have the power to collectively bargain for better working conditions and better pay? They're the ones that do the work, you know? Schultz, whatever his name is, the guy that was the CEO of Starbucks that got forced out when the unionization happened. Yeah, well, no, it's not a monopoly. It is collective efforts against the person who basically holds all the cards, the owner. Yeah, they kind of do that right now. That's the problem. That is the major problem in the US is that all these companies collectively lobby the government for favorable regulation. And yeah, they put so much money into the system that the politicians are beholden to them, and they weigh they put their thumb on the scale in their own favor. So yeah, we already have an oligopoly. What are you talking about? Where do you live anyway? Like, do you not live in the U.S.? Are you a small business owner? I'm suspecting that maybe you are a small business owner. America, of course. Oh, as though as though Twitch is only on in America and only viewed by Americans. Of course. Owner holds all the cards. Yes, they do. The owner decides who was hired and fired, what their wages are, what their working conditions are, what their scheduling is. What do you talk about? What are you talking about? You work in a factory that is ununionized. Oh my God. So you're not even advocating for your own class interest at this point. You want things worse for yourself. You want, you get paid tons of money and I'm very happy. Oh, that's great. That's great. Are there regulations that affect the safety of that company? Do you want to do away with OSHA? The market decides that. The market does not decide that. The market is a race to the bottom when it comes to wages. The market is trying to purchase labor. It views labor as a commodity, for one thing, and is trying to purchase labor for whatever the best deal they can get. So without regulations, without minimum wages, it's always going to be a race to the bottom because there's always someone that is more desperate than you. And companies will naturally cut corners to increase their profits. That's when the profit motive is front and center. That's just what they're going to do. The labor market is a race to the bottom. Yeah, when it is unregulated. It's called market equilibrium. Okay, so like during the Gilded Age, when we had some of the least market regulation there was just unprecedented wage growth. Things were going really well for people. Oh, Econ 101. Okay. The market equilibrium. Well, you said a word, so that must be the thing. That must be a thing that happens in the real world, because famously, economists are really good at predicting how people will act at all times and in all places, under all conditions. No, what? That famously bad time called the Golden Age? No, it was the Gilded Age because it was really good for capitalists at that point. Because it was great for them. There was the unprecedented monopolization, consolidation of businesses. You could argue that who are. I don't know what you're responding to there. Leftist economists are terrible at their job. Okay, cool. Right economists are terrible at their job. We've had now 40 years of Reaganomics, and things are not going great for the average person. The average worker's wages continue to stagnate and fall behind. I know, I'm getting going. I don't like Obama, so if you think that liberal is the same as leftist, then you've got another thing coming, and you've got a lot to learn about what leftists actually are. Obama was not a leftist. He was on the right as well. So there's that too. We've had 12 years of Reagan. We've had 40 years of Reaganomics. Even then, Reagan didn't deliver his policies fully. So he led the neoliberal revolution, the gutting of the social safety net that continued along through Clinton, through Bush, through Obama, through Trump, through all of them. No, he was not really even a progressive. So, yeah, I know. I got to get going, though. It's been fun chatting with you, but I do got to get going. You're welcome to come back anytime to the stream. I'm going to be on tomorrow night. Can you stop, please? 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to be talking about people's history of the United States. If you have some thoughts about that. Oh, okay. So you're just an asshole, and now you're going to try and get banned. That's cool. Yeah, typical rightist asshole who thinks that hierarchy is just applied to everybody. Okay. Time to ban you.
Bye.
You know, it was fun having a little chat with you for a little while there. But why do you got to do that? Are you like 14? Is this just a fun time for you to just insult people?
That's what I think.
And be gross? Because you don't actually have real arguments, and so you're just left with being a dick? Is that your MO here? That's real cool. Anyway, it's been real. Time to go. Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's it. Gonna ban you from there.
That's cute.
Yeah, what a fucking asshole. Doesn't have any arguments for why capitalism is so great, and
Is that
so
your girlfriend?
he insults my wife and me about our looks, as though if you thought my wife was attractive, like you just believe the things I say. Like, how are those two even at all related? You're just an idiot if that's what you have to resort to.
At least I'm clean. And I'm not a dick.
All right, you are the block. You're on the ban list now. So that was a fun way to end the stream. God, it's been a while since we had a troll that's willing to put in the 10 minutes of just watching me in order to actually say shitty, dumb things that, oh my God, I've never considered that. Have you considered capitalism and Soviet Union was bad? Oh my God. I've never considered these things. I just follow what I'm told. How do you think people get to leftist ideas? I was just reading. I was just following what we read in school and stuff, because they didn't exactly teach that in any school I've ever been to. Oh my God. Anyway, we're gonna take off the chat overlay too, because there's no reason for anyone to have to be subjected to that kind of immaturity. Yeah, what an idiot. Like, you know you got a winning argument when you have to say shit like that. All right. Is anyone still on? Yeah, there's still people on. So we are gonna raid.
I have a very early doctor's appointment. I'm not gonna hesitate to wake you up.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting off right now. We're gonna attempt to raid Beer Bash Johnson one time, but in the past it has not worked. If not him, I'll just pick someone else. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Raiders, for coming in. I hope you had a good time. And I hope to see you in future streams.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Here we go. We're going to try Beer Bash Johnson, but he's had things pretty locked down recently, so I haven't been able to raid. Oh yeah, it worked this time. Hell yeah. Go check out Beer Bash Johnson if you're finding this after the fact. Very cool channel. And here we go.